Morning. This is the Tuesday, March 5th, 2024 special city council meeting. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll such as it is?
Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, not yet present. Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon, not yet present. Councilmember Sneddon, present. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, not yet present. And Mayor Russ.
Here. All right, and you have an item to read?
Yes, item 1, budget work session for fiscal year 2025.
Very good. Mr. DiMartini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interim City Administrator Sarah Connect. I'm just going to start off the presentation today.
Okay.
To begin, the objectives for the morning is that the City Council will hear a presentation from staff related to the development of the mid-cycle fiscal year 2025 budget and provide direction from staff. Next slide, please. So the objectives for the agenda for today would be first, the objectives and priorities. Second, the budgetary challenges and discussion of Vision 2030, budget process and calendar, general fund multi-year forecast. Then we'll hear from all of our departments and their priorities. Finally, we'll have questions. And we encourage council to hold their questions to the end if that's acceptable. Public comment at that point, and then we'll have discussion and feedback from council. And at some point, up to the council, we'll have a break in the middle of the morning. Next slide, please. So objectives and priorities for the morning will be to understand revenue trends. Mr. DiMartini will present that. Recognize cost drivers, acknowledge economic impacts, mid-year, and remembering that this is a mid-year update only. So we'll have, changes, really recognizing that this is mid-year. And then discussion of the streamlined budget hearing schedule, which you all have already heard what the schedule will be, but we'll have a reminder on that, and then ask questions. Next slide. So we wanted also to just remember a little bit about the council celebrations that we recognized on February 22nd, and what a kind of nice acknowledgement that was, that you all recognize we've had a number of really significant achievements in the last year. Next slide. And then the council priorities that council, you all came together and acknowledged on the draft priorities on February 22nd, including economic vitality, community stability, emergency preparedness, sustainability and resilience, and quality of life. And remembering that these reflect the 10% priorities, not the 90%, which is what we all do every day for this community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. DiMartini. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Connect. Good morning, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DiMartini, and I'm the city's finance director. And it's my pleasure to present an overview today, discussing in a little bit of detail about our budgetary challenges as an organization, and just a brief reminder about Vision 2030 as that initiative, that those programs are meant to address our long-term fiscal sustainability as it relates to our budget process. So next slide. The city implements best practices when it comes to forecasting our revenues and expenditures. We go out not just the 1 year in question for our budget cycle, we go out multiple years. In most cases, we go out at least 3 or 4 years. For our enterprise funds and our capital improvement program, in those programs, we go out even further. We are able to project with some high degree of certainty what those revenues and expenditures will look like. And it's important that we take that long-term forecasting perspective, because the city is going to be here forever. We don't just budget in 1 year increments. And by implementing those best practices, we are able to identify potential surpluses that might be achieved. We are able to project deficits, and we can be able to implement strategies in advance of when those deficits might occur to sort of offset the impact to the community from those potential deficits. We're able to identify any structural imbalances in our funds that may exist beyond a one-year focus period. And then we can identify those challenges and then implement those strategies again in advance to sort of minimize the impact going forward. This entire process is informed by data. We use a lot of economic indicator information, both sort of within the state of California, but much more locally. We have a very localized economy here, and so it's important that we make our budgetary forecast decisions based on that data. It's very data-driven. This next slide summarizes some of the major fiscal and budgetary challenges that we encounter as an organization. None of these are new. These have been around for many, many years, but some of these have been exacerbated through COVID and then post-COVID activity in the economy in regards to inflation, as an example. We have had retention and recruitment challenges in our organization. Our vacancy rate has been high over the past couple of years, but it has been starting to stabilize. We have challenges affording labor wage increases with our bargaining groups, being able to afford those MOU changes in the long run. Our healthcare costs continue to increase at a much more rapid rate than the actual revenue, that additional revenue that is generated to pay for those types of cost increases. We're going to talk a little bit about pension costs today and the increases in our annual normal costs that we have to pay to CalPERS, but also the growing and fluctuating unfunded actuarial liability. And Council has taken recent decisive action to help the city address those challenges in the years to come. There is economic uncertainty. We're not in a recession right now. There have been talks of it over the past 12 to 18 months. We have been able to sort of sustain our economy in the short term, and hopefully that will continue going forward. High inflation has definitely been hard for us as an organization to continue to purchase the materials and supplies that we need to run the daily operations of the city, but also in our capital improvement program with being able to afford many of these large capital projects. And we have our reserve policy. We have a reserve policy, a target that is to be met, adopted by council, and making sure that that's a focus. And then finally, insurance costs have been astronomically expensive. And so being able to pay for our insurance premiums, but also just the cost of claims has been very high. So with that, a staff-led effort was implemented just over a year ago called Vision 2030. And this is sort of the umbrella, the overarching program to be able to address many issues and challenges with the organization, but also to address and achieve fiscal sustainability in the long run. So why this initiative? It's really the essence of good government. We want to continue to improve our services. We want to continue to implement emerging technologies. The pandemic really created an opportunity for us to build and learn and respond to the needs of the community in a different way. And that is allowing us to continue to improve. It's also a recognition that our revenue growth is not enough to cover our ongoing expenditure growth. And so we do have to have a concerted effort to achieve that level of fiscal sustainability that our organization deserves. And then finally, we want to make sure that our operations and our services meet the challenges of the community today, but also in the long term. Again, that's why this initiative is important as it relates to our multi-year forecasting process. And then finally, the way that we're being able to make progress and implement some of those strategies is through a series of working groups. And Council just received a really detailed report from those working groups not too long ago, and will continue to make progress. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Glusick, who's going to talk about our budget process and calendar.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini, Honorable Mayor, council members, members of the public. My name is Natalia Glusak. I'm the budget manager for the city of Santa Barbara, and I'm going to spend the next few slides just going over the budget process and calendar with you. So the GFOA is the Government Financial Officers Association, and they really set the best practices for all of our financial practices, including our annual report and our budgeting processes. We really employ those as a base and really do try to strive beyond them. We've consistently received a certificate of achievement for our budgeting efforts. We continue to focus on goals, strategies, priorities, and issues, and really try to make all of our processes transparent and understandable to everybody who might want to access the budget and get information from it. And we really do take to heart the feedback from that and try to improve our processes to make it easy to understand. One of the things that we've done to improve that, again, last year we went online with our online budget book during the 2-year process, which definitely improved transparency. The shift improved on many of those GFOA requirements, and as mentioned in the prior slide, including translation of all the pages very easily with one button, and not just the text of it, but the tables as well. We are making some improvements as we go along, including a new landing page with some drop-downs to improve the navigability. We're leveraging OpenGov for our quarterly reports, our capital planning, and our Measure C reports as well to familiarize everybody who uses our reports with that look and feel so that it's consistent. We're also going to add some additional pages to help clarify the budget process and how to navigate around in the budget to help our public and any other users try and figure out how to get to the information they need and have a better explanation of some of the differences between the budget reports, which are forward-looking for planning, and transparency tool data, which is showing our actuals, and what has happened is more of a performance metric. I'm going to take a moment just to go over the budget process, which is fairly consistent schedule each year, but it is a process of continual improvement. So we will see some variances here, but very small as we improve the process. So in October to December, we really do start digging into the budget process for the following cycle. Getting our information from the departments, formulating the base budget, et cetera. In January and March, the whole city jumps in to get the capital budget started, balancing our general fund, et cetera. And then in April and June, we go public with the proposed budget, and Finance Committee reviews it. All the fee changes come out for public review, et cetera. And then in July and September, after budget adoption, is when we start implementing it, and we start that process over with carryovers, redoing the ICS allocations and cost allocation studies. And I just want to take a moment, I'm going to stay on this slide for a little bit, because we want to walk through the budget process in more detail. This is a really well-vetted process. It's very common in governments, but it's not very different from what you might see in the nonprofit or private sector either, where it starts with finance doing some forecasting and ends with a council or a board or an executive suite making final decisions about the budget. So the first step in our budget was formerly called status quo. We felt that that was not the most appropriate name for it. It was confusing, and so base budget is a much better nomenclature for that. It is our starting point. It is where we really start to build the next budget cycle from. To do this, we take the past year numbers. Again, this time we're in a mid-year cycle, so we take the second year of the 2-year cycle, and we employ whatever known changes are on that. Those could include union negotiated MOUs, internal service charge changes, allocation changes, and inputs from indicators such as inflation to change those numbers and give our departments a starting point. We are currently in the departmental entry phase, which is the next phase. At that point, we kick out to the departments to bring in their expertise on the operations, on how they actually deliver the services. So they take our base budget as a starting point, and they'll look at it and ask questions such as, do they have the personnel to run, such a certain program? Is there an alternative funding source that they're aware of that might loosen up some of the general funds for other needs, et cetera? And there's also a collective discussion between the departments about capital planning that starts at this phase. Next, we shift into the finance review. At this point, the departments will bring their propositions to the city administrator for further development. And at this point, we'll look at, does the departmental proposition make sense within the city as a whole? Are there any kind of joint solutions for issues that are brought forward or synergies that can be found? And also, we continue that collective discussion on the capital spending. Next is the recommended budget. This happens in April, and that is when we bring the proposed budget to the public for consideration and review. And this is when staff makes all of their presentations to council in a public forum. And we really do pay attention to the public comment and other input, and we synthesize that information so that it can be digested and understood when it gets to the next phase, which is budget deliberation. So the budget deliberation is when we bring all of the information that we've gathered from the public, and council will deliberate on which changes to include and what to do with other changes and possibly longer term type of goals. So then after that, the council will vote on the budget and hopefully adopt it. Hold on just a second. All right, so just a little bit more about the base budget. Again, formerly the status quo. Again, we start with that second year of the 24-25 financial plan, and that has that current position list. We had some assumptions built in, such as a 4% salary adjustment on any non-negotiated union groups. There was a 3% general fund reduction target, which was $4.1 million for FY25. And we also had a normal attrition savings that was built in there as a salary savings. When we started to develop the base budget, there were some of the changes included that known salary and benefit adjustments from labor negotiations that did finish during the last fiscal year. There were also some health and pensions cost changes that we were aware of because we get notifications from our providers that the rates are changing. So since we know that, we're going to put that in the next year's budget. The internal service allocations sometimes will change due to service levels or input costs for those kinds of allocations. We also do have position changes and some structural and program changes. And just as a reminder, the general fund deficit at the base budget was 1.4 million. And before the 4.1 million of target reductions are implemented, that's a $5.5 million deficit. So I'm going to just take a small example through the course of the budget process. So this is, again, just one example that works in concert with a lot of other things, so it's a very simplified example. So the second year of the plan, as I mentioned, assumed an increase on unnegotiated union groups of 4%. We since then had a group that agreed on a 5.5% raise, so we introduced that. And the base budget then had an increase to salary and benefit lines. In departmental entry, that updated budget, which includes all of the council-approved positions, was given out to the departments for their analysis. They may determine that they need an additional position or a class change, or perhaps a position that is budgeted, that is vacant, and budgeted at one step, they know that they're going to hire it at a lower step. So they bring back that information with perhaps a net increase to those salary and related benefit lines to the next step, which is the finance review. And so they bring all of their changes, they highlight them. We have an open discussion about it, which can be very lively. So there may be other solutions. It may be questioned as to why do you think you need these things? And also there may be follow-up between departments trying to figure out what the best solution is for distributing our resources. Perhaps at the city administrator review, the new position requests are approved and the change in step hire is approved, but there is no change from the departmental entries on this particular topic. Once we release it to the public, this happens in April, the department requests are presented. This is the budget that we as a staff think is our best foot forward. That is put forth for public review. We really do collect that feedback. We take a lot of notes. We really try to make it very clear what was said in these meetings so that we can make the best decisions for it. And we take further direction from council. There is a final proposal that we prepare for council deliberation that includes all of that feedback. Then in deliberation, we present that, and council members will vote on which changes to include, and the reports are publicly tallied, and then staff goes back and takes those results, incorporates them into that final budget, and the budget is then voted on at a subsequent meeting and hopefully adopted. We are in a deficit space. We do have some short-term solutions for that, including the departmental expenditure reductions, minimizing our use of reserves, considering some operational efficiencies, of course, and also considering some short-term revenue options, generating options. In the long term, we are discussing and prioritizing our services so that they align with what our community actually wants and needs and what council wants and needs us to do. We are implementing a lot of new operational efficiencies as we consider which ones are the best ones that will work together for the long term. And we are also need to implement and obtain some approval for some revenue generating options. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see the reminder of our 2% expenditure ongoing from 2024 and the 3% expenditure reduction for 2025. Those are both included in the base budget and will be included going forward through the process. And again, just a reminder that we do consider the service level impacts, and that if a department comes up with a new or additional revenue streams, that will offset some of that expenditure reduction. And any new requests will require some justification, and positions and reclass requests need to be cost neutral. This slide is showing that our budget is growing. Over the last 3 years, it has grown approximately $30 million. That's 16%. Even with the budget reductions, it simply slows the rate of growth slightly. It's not that we are spending less money, we are spending more money. But we are trying to be more efficient about it, but just the overall take home on this slide is that we do have a growing budget. And this slide is just a reminder about our enterprise and internal service funds. We spend a lot of time talking about our general funds and cost reductions. The enterprise funds are responsible for balancing their own budget and producing a 5-year operating and capital forecast. Internal service funds all do have the same reduction targets as the general fund, with the exception of fleet replacement and self-insurance funds. And the enterprise and internal service funds do have to meet their reserve policy targets, and if they do not, they need to present a plan and a timeline for approval to meet those targets. Some topics that we will be discussing during the budget process. You'll see that there are several up here. I'm sure that more will come up. Water, wastewater rates, which have already started discussion, downtown parking's financial situation, inflation is on all of our minds, the classification and compensation study and how to implement that, some state and other mandates that our staff have where we must implement things and they are currently not funded, and then other sorts of things like our cost recovery and revenue policy implementation. As mentioned before, we are streamlining our schedule. In prior years, this slide was actually several slides for this mid-cycle term. And again, just a reminder, we are going to be concentrating on presenting the differences between what was presented in the second year of the 2-year financial plan. So we have already had some of these meetings, such as the Water and Wastewater Finance Committee meeting. But the first meeting that we will be really presenting the budget publicly will be on April 23rd when we do the budget introduction. And then we will be having one meeting, and these are all going to be in regular council meetings as well instead of special meetings. May 14th, we will be presenting on all general fund departments as one longer meeting. And then we will be presenting on all of the other funds, so enterprise funds, special funds, internal service funds, the following week. Then we will have deliberation and hopefully budget adoption on the 11th of June. And then after that, we will have a rate hearing on the proposed water and wastewater and solid waste at the end of June, and then put those forward for adoption on July 2nd. And with that, I will hand it back to Mr. DeMartini.
Thank you so much, Ms. Glusek. Okay, so the next section of this morning's presentation is to talk in more detail about the general fund multi-year forecast that staff has recently been working on and will continue to work on throughout the budget process. In these next series of slides, we're going to go into some detail about the general fund specifically, about the trends of our tax revenue and other revenues, and then also talk about the expenditure pressures in the general fund, and then talk about the impact on reserves and go from there. So we'll start on this slide, which is a summary table of the major general fund tax and other revenues that we get in the general fund, looking back a couple of years of actual and the current budget and projection, and then looking forward about what the second year of the two-year plan is and what the current base revenue projection is for those general fund taxes. We've highlighted some numbers in red that show a sort of a negative trend compared to the budget, and the numbers in green show a positive trend, and we'll kind of do that throughout these slides. And what I will say is that the base revenue projections for fiscal year 25 are as of the base budget, which staff released to department staff to start looking at in December. We have new recent information that actually indicates that we should probably bring down a little bit some of our revenue projections in fiscal year 25, and we will do that. And I will wait till the last possible minute to do that because I want the most current information before we put out the city administrator's recommended budget. But as you can see, and as Ms. Glusick indicated earlier, the city's overall general fund revenues are growing. They are growing. But what you can see is that our 24 projection for our taxes, most of them are coming in a little bit late, right? They're coming in a little bit lower than we budgeted. Property tax continues to remain strong, and we do have a diverse set of revenue streams in the general fund, which is great for us. We're not heavily reliant on one or two, and you can see the proportional share on the pie chart on the right. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about sales tax for just a moment. And as you can see, sales tax has grown fairly steadily in the past couple of years, but it is volatile. And it was definitely proven to be volatile during COVID when there was a lot of reduced sort of economic activity, a lot of reduced tourism activity. About half of our sales tax revenue is generated from the tourism industry alone. And so it really kind of shined a light on how volatile the sales tax revenue streams are for our community, but we are showing growth. It's just not a lot of growth. It's basically has sort of reached a new sort of stable level of sales tax annual growth year over year, but it's not substantial. That same trend is what occurs in our Measure C district sales tax also. There is a little bit of variability in the different streams of revenue that come in for our Measure C district sales tax versus our other 1% Bradley-Burns sales tax, but it's not that significant. But as you can see, in just the general fund sales tax, it's just over $30 million annually. And then for our Measure C, it's actually a little bit more. We're projecting in fiscal year 25 to exceed $32 million in that fiscal year. So now let's talk about property tax. And property tax has proven to be the most stable and the tax revenue that where we achieve the most growth. Now, this is actually my favorite graph in the entire slide deck. And it's pretty remarkable that property tax continues to be strong, even when we think it wouldn't. During COVID, when mortgage interest rates are astronomical right now, houses are still turning over. They continue to be reassessed at higher valuation. We get our base level of Prop 13, 2% CPI growth every year. There's only been a couple of years where it's been a little bit lower than that. So this is truly our most stable revenue stream in the general fund, and it is projected to continue to grow. And the amount of money that's coming in this current fiscal year is exceeding the rather aggressive budget that we put forth in the 24 adopted budget. Again, all good signs. We also have a very small amount of revenue that comes in for our real property transfer tax. And so this is an individual tax that gets assessed when a property changes ownership, when the transaction actually occurs. This is obviously a more volatile source because it's only based when a property changes ownership. We only get about $1 million a year, so it's not much money, but it does show that it is volatile. It actually has gone down in recent years again because there are fewer transactions, fewer properties changing ownership. Now let's talk about transient occupancy tax, and this is our most volatile general fund tax. And as you can see, during COVID, it dropped off pretty significantly to the lowest levels before, fiscal year 2012, 2013, to around $15 million, and it hovered there for 2 years. And then it rebounded very aggressively to its new record level of over $26 million in fiscal year 22. And then it kind of stayed there, right? The industry sort of reached sort of a new normal. The tourism industry, the level of activity, people coming and staying in our hotels sort of leveled off. And we're not seeing growth in TOT. We're not seeing any additional revenue growth than I think many economic indicators indicated that they would. Our projection in the current fiscal year is pretty spot on. It's actually coming in a smidge lower than what we were originally projecting. And you can see that the TOT revenue that comes in is really driven by the average daily rates that the hotels are able to charge for those rooms, and then also hotel occupancy. And this industry is very cyclical. As you can see during the summer months, not only is the occupancy a lot higher, but the average daily rates are higher as well. And then it is very cyclical. And you can see that the average daily rates were really the driver for that additional revenue growth in fiscal year 22, and then it kind of stabilized. So we are very aware of the cyclicality of this, and we budget on a monthly basis for the TOT revenue, and our projections are coming to fruition here. The next tax in the general fund that's worth discussing is utility users tax, or UUT. This is a very stable revenue source. It does not grow substantially. The major reason why it has grown over the past couple of years a little bit is really due to inflation. It's because your energy costs are going up. It's also because the water costs are going up. We do charge an assessed UUT on all of those utilities. So when our utility costs go up, the UUT amount will go up proportionally as well. And that you'll see that that dark blue color goes to zero in fiscal year 24, and that is due to the renegotiated Marburg garbage contract. And the utility user tax is no longer assessed on garbage, but that revenue loss is made up for in an adjustment to the franchise fee that is recovered through that Marburg contract. The next couple of taxes we're talking about are our business license and cannabis taxes. These are not large revenue generators for the city. They are fairly stable. We don't have a lot of additional business growth, business activity in this community. We haven't in recent years, and so it has remained fairly stable, just under $3 million annually. And we are hopeful that with the change of going online and allowing businesses to be able to file their remittance online and pay with a credit card, that we will ensure more compliance with our business license municipal code over time. And it has proven to be much more efficient for the vast majority of businesses, and hopefully that will prove to be true going forward. The cannabis tax, you can see it's a pretty concerning trend, right? It's not much revenue for us, so it's not something that we focus on terribly, but where there is no growth in our cannabis tax. It has come down from its peak of $1.9 million back in fiscal year 2021, with no real growth being projected going forward. So just to summarize staff's major takeaways on our taxes, and I think this graphic is sort of illuminating to what's going on with our taxes. We're really kind of squeezing what we can out of them. There is no major significant growth for any of these taxes. Property tax, as I mentioned earlier, is the most stable, and it is the one where we achieve the most growth, and that is fantastic. But again, as you can see with sales tax, TOT, UUT, business license tax, there really is no major growth that we are experiencing or acknowledging, so we've sort of plateaued and reached a new normal to where we can fairly accurately project where they will end up, barring any major change in the economy. And we have projected those in our fiscal year 25 budget, and we will go into more detail in the coming months. So that's sort of the major takeaway on revenues. Now let's shift gears and look at the other side of our income statement and talk about our expenditures. This table here summarizes our general fund expenditures broken out into the major categories that we talk about them in. most notably salaries and benefits, but we also spend money on supplies and contractual services. We purchase equipment, and there are some capital that's funded by the general fund. And then we also have a line here that's worth noting about a reserve contribution. So the general fund primarily pays for people. It funds staff. It funds staff that work in public safety, that work in park and recreation, the library, community development, and many other core functions that the community expects services from. And it's the vast majority of that pie. It's the biggest piece, pays for salaries and benefits of our staff. But we also pay for, again, supplies, materials, contracts, and many other things. The reserve contribution is notable here because the council adopted reserve policy says that 25% of our annual operating expenditures needs to stay in reserve, right? That basically represents 3 months of operating. If we had no revenue come in at all in that time period, we would have 3 months of cash in the bank to be able to pay for those ongoing services. As Ms. Glusick indicated earlier, because our expenditure budget grows every year, the amount of money we need to keep in reserve will grow proportionally as well because it's 25%. So we need to put in that reserve contribution amount annually every year, an additional reserve amount, in order to maintain that 25% level. And so that's how we sort of have chosen to present it going forward. Next slide, please. So there are some major challenges we have on our expenditures in the general fund. First and foremost, it pays for salaries and benefits, as I mentioned earlier. And I put 76% here for salaries and benefits, which is different than the slide prior, because when you take out Measure C, because Measure C funds primarily fund our capital improvement programs, which is not staff-based, what the general fund operating fund is about 3/4 of the overall city budget. And so when staff costs go up, negotiated MOUs, and then also costs associated with health benefits, our pension costs, it is the vast majority of our general fund allocation. It pays for mostly the minimum staffing requirements in fire, public safety, library, park and rec, as I mentioned earlier. We've included the costing for all of our full-time positions, our hourly positions. We have known step increases for staff that will come due. We have salary adjustment assumptions, as Ms. Glusick mentioned earlier. We also budget for overtime. All of that is done very thoroughly at the department phase and will be presented to City Council in the coming months. And as I mentioned earlier, benefits for medical, pension, so on and so forth. Let's talk about pension management for just a moment. And again, there were recent decisive actions taken by the City Council that will help the city address its pension liability and its ongoing pension cost increases going forward. The City Council adopted a pretty significant change to its reserve policy to establish a pension stabilization reserve going forward that will take any surpluses that might occur in the general fund and other funds and allocate a portion of that to the newly created Section 115 trust, where we will be able to earn more interest earnings on those investments than in our current investment portfolio. And council established a pension management policy, which really articulated an order of events about how we can address our pension liabilities going forward in a systematic way. That graph on the bottom left shows what our funded ratio is for our CalPERS liability. We're hovering around 68% at the moment, but as you can see, it does fluctuate, and it primarily fluctuates on how successful CalPERS is in achieving the rate of return that they want to achieve. And they're not always successful in doing that. And when that occurs, not only does our liability go up pretty substantially, and right now it's over $400 million citywide, but our funded ratio will fluctuate as well. The graph on the right shows our annual contribution that we need to make as an organization to CalPERS to draw down that pension liability going forward. And there is variability in that. It's based on an actuarial study that they commission, but as you can see, it grows. So now that we've implemented these strategies and we've taken some decisive action, we will be investing those monies, and at some point in the near future, we'll make a decision to send that additional money over to CalPERS, and that will be the action that will significantly reduce our liabilities and our expenses going forward. So we are on the path to addressing this issue. The other major challenge facing not only the general fund, but other funds across the city are insurance. And the insurance industry has changed pretty dramatically over the past couple of years as it relates to climate conditions that we are experiencing across the entire United States, drought, flooding, wildfires, and the insurance industry is global now. So an insurance-related event that may occur on the East Coast impacts our ability to get high quality but also cost-efficient insurance programs locally here. It's really a nationwide issue. And on the liability side, there are challenges we have with claims and the ability to pay claims as it relates to law enforcement, the oversight of at-risk population, the escalating value of jury verdicts and the ability for us to close out claims before it gets to that point. And there are many challenges in the insurance industry. And how that manifests and impacts us from a financial perspective is this graph here, which shows our self-insurance fund reserves. There is no reserve requirement in the self-insurance fund. However, we do commission an actuarial study every 2 years in line with our 2-year financial planning process. And that actuary takes all of the data about how many claims we have, our total payroll for our employees. It looks at what we are expected to pay out on claims going forward. It looks at the cost for us to purchase the various insurance programs that we need to be able to operate and run this city. And it tells us how much money we need to have in reserve. And the most recent study that was commissioned indicated that we needed to have over $24 million in reserve. And we are hovering below the $10 million, we're actually around $5 million at the moment. So we are underfunded. The self-insurance fund is underfunded. And we got direction from the Finance Committee and City Council not too long ago to make some progress over the next 9 years to increase our allocations into the fund to be able to hopefully get back up to the actuarial recommended level. And the way that that impacts the general fund and other funds is it's additional operating expense. So an additional allocation expense in the police department budget is what we have to do, for example, to increase our revenue into the self-insurance fund. So now let's talk about the impact on reserves, now that we've kind of talked about our general fund revenues and our general fund expenditures. And this graph is a graph over the last 20 years of the level of our general fund reserves compared to the red line, which is that 25% policy level target, which includes 10% contingency and 15% disaster reserve target. That black line is that 15% disaster reserve. And as you can see, we fluctuate. In times when the economy is encountering challenges, we've had to dip into our reserves. We have been able to stabilize and rebound and recover and replenish those reserves over the past couple of years. Then COVID hit, and you can see the impact there. And then you can see our projection going forward. Because of a structural operating budget deficit, it will require the use of reserves, barring any other strategy being implemented. And these changes are sort of illuminated more clearly on the next slide, slide 46, where it shows how we've had to dip into our reserve year over year, or how we've been able to replenish those reserves when the economy rebounded back after the Great Recession, and through some pretty strong fiscal discipline by the City Council, being able to achieve surpluses over a sort of the 8-year period to replenish those reserves. You can see, though, that when the Thomas Fire hit, and then again during COVID, how the hit on reserves are acknowledged. And then through federal stimulus and federal action, through the American Rescue Plan Act by Council dedicating the first tranche of the American Rescue Plan Act funds to the general fund to not have to cut services more significantly than we already did. That action did have a positive impact on the general fund and ultimately the reserves. And then again, as we've been talking about, our long-range projection does indicate potentially using reserves in order to stabilize the general fund, and that will have an impact going forward. So this slide here just kind of summarizes the major assumptions that staff is currently using in our general fund multi-year forecast, all of which we've already spoken about today. But these are the assumptions that we have built into the base budget that we've already talked about and are going forward into the department phase, and that will be included in the city administrator's recommended budget when it gets released in mid-April. So these are the assumptions being used, assumptions on our general fund taxes, assumptions on salary increases being assumed, pension costs, inflation, the self-insurance fund, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of a summary of the major topics that we've already talked about. When putting our general fund revenues and expenditures on a graph, this is what it looks like. And so going back about 5 years, you can see where they ended up. And then you can see whenever the expenditure line is above the revenue line, it indicates a deficit. It indicates a structural budget deficit that we have. And you can see that they're close, but the gap between the lines does grow. So it means that that deficit will grow in those out years. Again, an indication that the ongoing revenue growth that we are expected to have from our current revenue sources are not enough to cover the ongoing growth in expenditures. And so then that lends itself to this table, which shows what those deficits are in the past couple of years and then going forward. It's important to note that the deficit currently in the base in fiscal year 2025 is low. And when we issue the city administrator's recommended budget, that deficit will be higher. It will be closer to what's currently in the second year of the plan. And the reason why it's lower is because we've implemented a change in our methodology about producing the base budget and working with departments. Instead of including the cost of certain salary-related positions like hourlies and some overtime, those costs are not at the moment in our base budget. We're going to go through a much more thorough, comprehensive and consistent process with our departments about how we budget for hourly positions and other types of salary-related positions that will be included going forward. Going through recent budget processes, it's clear that the way that we budget for some of these types of costs is not necessarily consistent among departments, and we're hoping to achieve that this cycle and then going forward. Okay, so that concludes the sort of multi-year forecast and budget-related content that we have prepared for you today. The next section of the presentation this morning will be a very brief presentation from each department director, where they will come up and give a quick high-level overview of some of the major highlights that the department has achieved in the current fiscal year 2024. They'll also come up and talk about some of the current challenges that they are experiencing in their department, and then talk about what their department priorities are going forward into fiscal year 2025. So we will start out with the airport.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse and council members. Chris Haster, Airport Director. Happy to kick off the department discussion. Happy to note that the airport revenues are healthy and increasing. But with that, as Mr. DiMartini mentioned, there's a lot of increasing costs for expenses, both operationally and with our capital projects. But however, we have a lot of highlights and challenges that both have positive narratives, so I'm happy to jump into that. So we have record airline growth, which brings challenges as well. But as you can see on the chart, we have over 30% increase in passengers since 2019. But with that, part of that change is related to a change in aircraft type. And you see we actually have accommodated that 30% increase with 32% less flights. So you will see as we do our master plan update, it actually has a positive impact on our noise concern. Not to say that the noise concern has gone away, but definitely has helped. Part of that increase really has to do with the stigma that used to exist around regional airlines and cancellations and delays. With the pandemic and pilot shortages, we've seen a major shift to mainline carriers with the larger 150-seat plus aircraft. And that has brought us reliability and efficiency at the airport that has gained a lot of trust in our community to where they're using the airport a lot more than they used to. And we continue to see that growth, including with the addition of Delta Airlines in June of this year. We have made a lot of progress in building strong community ties. We understand that noise is still a concern. We're off to a little bit of a slow start, but I'm happy to report as of last week, we've made some significant progress with the city of Goleta to establish that noise working group that we had discussed. We continue to meet with community members one-on-one before that process gets going, and we'll be meeting with the county shortly to establish who is going to be on that noise working group as well. So noise is still a concern of ours and definitely taking it serious. Even though the trend towards getting better has been shown, it is still an issue for the airport. Two of our top challenges at the airport this coming year are going to be PFAS cleanup and remediation. If you're not familiar with PFAS, that's a forever chemical that is in the firefighting foam. So through any incidents that we've had at the airport, wherever that foam has been applied, we are now in phase 4 of an investigative effort with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and eventually that will lead to some remediation at the airport. So a lot of unknown costs coming up in the future and current costs for that investigative work. However, as I mentioned, positive narratives. We are happy to report that this year we will be transitioning entirely over to fluorine-free foam, which means that all of the firefighting foam as well as the foam that's in the firefighting systems within the hangar systems will be transitioned over. So we will not have any more PFAS containing foam at the airport. So if there are future incidents, we won't be contributing to the existing problem. The other major concern that we have is flooding at the airport. As you've seen in the last year and a half, we have actually closed the airport 3 times. That's not a good situation to be in. So we have a lot of work being done to look at the long-term fixes, but I'm also happy to report that we've been working with flood control, and we do have a short-term solution that we are evaluating. We will know more within the next week. Believe it or not, it involves K-rails, so just thought I'd mention that. But we're very hopeful that if this solution works out to where we don't cause another impact to somebody else, that it will prevent us from being flooded if we have significant rainfall continuing this year. Obviously, our priorities are for running a safe and efficient airport, including being self-sufficient, but that also means keeping our operating budget lean enough to put sufficient resources towards our aggressive capital project efforts. And we have an amazing capital development department headed by Ms. Sarah Isa, and just really quickly going down the list, we have a lot of capital projects going that it's more than we probably should have taken on, but with all of the aging infrastructure at the airport, there's much work to be done. And with the focus on shifting things around at the airport, everything's in flux right now. So just quickly going down the list, we're working on the FBO relocation and redevelopment, the master plan update, sea level rise adaptation plan, master drainage plan, terminal improvement project, paving projects to meet our changing FAA requirements for safety. It's interesting. We have had taxiways that have been laid out exactly the same for decades, but now they have seen a trend in the country where if a plane can go straight from a ramp onto an airplane without having to make a turn, it increases the potential of an issue with an aircraft going onto a runway that's not supposed to be. So we'll be making some taxiway changes to enhance safety. And then parking improvements with the extra passengers using the airport, and of course the many aging infrastructure projects with very old infrastructure on the airport, from buildings to HVAC to pipes, everything, including pavement as well. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think what we'll do is we'll get through the reports and we'll ask questions for the,
Yep.
that works for you, Madam Administrator, is that, yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Renee Irely, Assistant City Administrator, and I will be giving the update from our office. We had quite a number of highlights over the last year, including the launch of Vision 2030, our initiative. It's a 6-year initiative, as we've talked about recently over the last couple of months, and obviously like making that investment in not only how to be a fiscally sustainable organization, but supporting our operations in optimization and really having a thriving workforce that is supported and can do the great work for our community. The leasing of the Daytime Navigation Center. I think it's the first of a kind for our community and a real opportunity to celebrate, and it's going to be transformative for the downtown area and builds on the work of, synergistically, of all the work that we've done over the last several years around homeless response. So we're quite elated to get that moving forward. Essential SB communication. This is a citywide communication campaign to raise awareness about city services and to engage the community to get their input on what and how we're providing and the budget attached to that work. We've been working on that since last fall. We are continuing that through this spring, and we'll be bringing an update to all of you in council later in the May-June timeframe. And then the first annual report on community oversight. Again, this is the work that we've been working for several years, coming out of the Community Formation Commission and now the reconstituted Fire and Police Commission. It's coming to council next week with an update on really the excellent work that has been done collectively from the police department, the community, our CAO office, and the community. Around challenges, I think the highlight of that would be living in a time of transition through city administrators. It is the second time in 3 years where we've gone through a process of transition from the time of October with Ms. Bjork's announcement and Ms. Connett coming in and ably handling the transition until May when Ms. McAdoo comes in. That's still the good part of a year where we have worked with a number of leaders. And so really, I think for all of us in our office and our department heads has been helping to keep our whole organization, focused on the tasks at hand and relying on their expertise to best serve our community and really let them know that they're in good hands, we're in good hands, and that all will be well. And that leads to our priorities, is the really onboarding Ms. McAdoo so that she understands the culture of our city, both internally with the organization, but also getting her well acquainted and integrated into our community at large. So our team is working right now on that game plan for her to make that transition as smooth as possible for her. And then, as last week, congratulating the council on adopting their priority setting process, the first ever, and I think that there's great work to be done out of that. So our team will be taking that feedback from that workshop and working with you and the community over the summer and our new city administrator to gear up for what will now be the annual priority setting process in October to come back and really drill down on that work. Later this afternoon, you'll be hearing from Townsend, who is our legislative support group, for lack of a better term, in Sacramento. And I think that's an investment that we've made not only with our internal staff, both with Mr. Bodette and Ms. Anderson, but having that not just taking a tracking and passive look at what's happening legislatively in the state, but really helping us focus and prioritize and be more actively engaged with our legislators in Sacramento. So I think that's a really exciting time for Santa Barbara to be elevating our voice on what matters to us in the state capitol. And then finally, continuing to really evolve our citywide communications. I think you're seeing that the change in how we are engaging with the community and how we're not just how we're messaging, but how we are having conversation with them. That will continue now that we have a new community engagement officer, and really I think leveraging our outreach teams that we have throughout the city so that they are more unified in their messaging, that we understand the priorities from the community and we are more responsive to that. And then also really leveraging our city TV. We have a great resource that's not every city has the benefit of that. So we will be looking, again, just to continue to really make that system better. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Tava Ostringer, Acting City Attorney. As you know, most of the legal services that the city gets is through the city attorney's office. We provide those in-house, which I think is a great benefit to the city. We have our finger on the pulse, so we know what your priorities are going to be. We know what our department's priorities are going to be, and we can nimbly address those. So we're actually a very internal-facing department. However, occasionally we do some work that has good impacts on both public welfare and the community's sustainability. And there's 3 that I'd really like to highlight that I'm very proud of. The short-term vacation rental enforcement pilot program that William Alva and his team of special investigators and Denny Way are handling. I am happy to report that they have collected approximately $453,000 in transit occupancy tax that wouldn't have otherwise been collected absent this program. And of course, the tenant protection ordinances that have come through, I think the community has been very grateful for that, and I want to thank Dan Henschke for taking the lead on that. And I'm sure that more work will be coming as we address both through state legislation that's coming down for tenant protection and hearing the needs from the community. And then, of course, a big win, the Santa Barbara Local Housing Trust Fund. I want to thank Sarah Connect and John Doimus in conjunction with Finance and Community Development for getting that program off the ground. We're already seeing benefits from it. Last Thursday, for a project at 101 Garden, we've gotten $500,000 that will now be going into that program. So that's a nice kickoff. As I'm sure you're all aware, we have had some challenges, and the biggest one being probably is a shortage of staffing at our attorney level due to attrition for various reasons. Ms. Connect going over to a new position, Mr. Henschke retiring, some attorneys leaving for other jobs. But I am happy to say that we have hired 2 new deputy city attorneys, Heather Minter and Delaney Satz. Both started with us at the end of December, and we are in the process of training them. They've been a great help to us already, and it's been a blessing while we're in this transition phase. We do have 1 more position to fill, Assistant City Attorney 4 position, so we will be looking to fill that and get up to full staffing so we can address everybody's needs. And I appreciate everyone's patience in the departments as we are trying to keep up. Other challenges is obviously the state legislation, the state taking a lot of our control away, and us as city attorneys in conjunction with our departments trying to figure out how we're going to address that and maintain as much control as we possibly can. And then in our civil litigation side, we've seen a higher than average litigation caseload. With COVID, there has been a backlog of trials, but coming in, I believe as soon as May, we are going to be in trial, and Tom Shapiro, in conjunction with Deputy City Attorney Delaney Satz, will be very busy. So it's important for us to also then get fully staffed before that time. Our priorities, we'd like to continue the short-term vacation rental pilot program. Since it's been so successful, we'll be coming to you in April with an update on that program and an ask to continue that. With the update of the housing element, congratulations to community development on that. We will be working with them to implement the policies and programs, and part of that, I assume, will be a Title 30 update. So that will be a heavy lift in our office. We will continue to train existing new hires, particularly as we bring in the next new hire. The one thing I forgot to put on here, but I'm happy to announce the sign ordinance should be coming to the ordinance committee in April is what I'm told. So that'll be great after a few years of not having anything in place. And with that, just your priorities are our office's priorities and the department's priorities. So it's for us, whatever you want as a priority is what we'll make of it. We'll be nimble and we'll address whatever your needs are. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to community development.
Good morning, Mayor Ralston, council members. My name is James Hamilton. I'm the Community Development Business Manager, and I'm filling in for Director Isaacson today to give the community development overview and share some information with you. Community development has 82 FTEs, and we have a general fund budget of $16 million for our expenditure budget. Moving on to the highlights, challenges, and priorities section of the slide. The first highlight that I'd like to share with you is just the certification of the 6-cycle housing element. This was a major accomplishment led by the long-range planning team and achieved in collaboration with the City Attorney's Office, the Planning Commission, and this council. Another highlight that I'd like to share are many improvements that we've made to our Acela permitting software. A few of those are we migrated to a cloud version of the software that keeps us on the current version all the time. We made upgrades to the Acela Citizen Access Portal, which is the public-facing piece of it, to just provide a better customer service experience. We launched a permit decision tool that helps guide customers through the process, and we made many other improvements. I thank the hard work of staff for that and the investment in a Acela administrator position by council. You'll see a bit of redundancy in some of these bullet points, and that's because we do work collaboratively, of course, across departments. The Local Housing Trust Fund was a major accomplishment that staff certainly played a role in. That was a collaborative effort and should be an effort that provides benefit for a long time to come, especially as a long-term funding source is identified. Another bullet that you have already seen, but I will share, is the Daytime Navigation Center and securing the lease on that facility. Obviously, the work continues to get the permits necessary to operate that as a facility that can be open to the public. But another area related to that is the expanded night and weekend street outreach. Previously, street outreach services were only offered Monday through Thursday and ended at around 6 p.m. In the updated contract with CityNet, we expanded those services to go Thursday through Sunday and run until, I believe, 10 p.m. at night, targeting the waterfront and downtown areas. Looking at the challenges that we faced during the year, staffing levels and long-range planning have been a challenge. Over the last 2 budget cycles, due to budget cuts and realignment, we've lost a full FTE in that group, and we've seen significant workload increases. Recruitments, attrition, and training of new staff have also proven to be challenging, specifically related to plan check positions in building and safety. That has been very difficult to recruit for. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of retirements and a number of promotions that opens vacancies and brings on a lot of new hires in a short period of time. So while we're always working to improve our new hire training, it just does take a while to get people up to speed. Unfunded state housing mandates are something that takes staff time and moves resources from other priorities, and it can take quite a bit of effort to interpret the new rules and then work those into our processes. And just a couple examples of those would be AB 2097, which changed the parking requirements for certain projects, and changes to the state density bonus rules. Those are some of the more recent ones. Another area of challenge that we've seen is reduced state and federal grant funds, specifically our permanent local housing allocation fund. We've seen that go from $775,000 last year to $388,000 this year. That award amount is generated from real estate activity, from a fee on those transactions. We knew it was going to go down. It was a bit more drastic than anticipated, and it just makes it difficult to develop a multi-year spending plan. Looking ahead to priorities in the next fiscal year, implementation of the housing element and related ordinances. And a few of the housing element programs that are coming are tracking housing production, so a no net loss policy to track pending, proposed, and actual units, an adaptive reuse ordinance, a feasibility study for inclusionary housing, a review of hotel zones to look at zones that have both hotel and residential use in the same zone, and working on a development of a framework and an ordinance for short-term rental programs. With regard to our permitting software, we have two major improvements just on the horizon. The land development team is implementing a digital plan review software, and the training and implementation of that will go into fiscal year 2025. And also, it will be implemented before the end of this year, but it will continue to be refined and developed, which is an online inspection request system, and that's taking what is currently a very manual process and automating it with the help of our RSL administrator and staff. We have additional process improvements and streamlining for land development on the horizon. That would include things like the package of Title 30 amendments, reducing the number of single-family design board triggers and appealable actions, and adopting objective design and development review standards. And then State Street Master Plan adoption, that's anticipated for mid to late 2025. And just leaving you with a couple of quick statistics. Last calendar year, Building and Safety issued 1,626 building permits. There's currently 1,869 housing units in the pipeline, and that only includes full applications, so pre-applications are not counted. And over the last 4 calendar years, we have dispersed $17 million in loans and grants to affordable acquisition, development, and rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to finance.
Okay, great. I'll give an update on the finance department. And really, the mission statement of the finance department is there at the bottom on the slide, which says that our staff provides financial expertise and guidance to the city council and city departments and maintains the financial integrity of the city. And there are a couple highlights that are definitely worth noting of our work in this current fiscal year. First and foremost is the work that we've done to address our pension costs and liability. We worked very closely with Finance Committee and the City Council to adopt the city's pension management policy and establish the Section 115 trust. That is a huge win for the city, and so we're very proud to have worked on that very collaboratively. We also continue to make strides to improve the transparency of all of our budget and financial information. The implementation of OpenGov is transformative with how we present our budget to the City Council, how we work collaboratively within departments, and how we communicate our priorities and our budget to the community. We also have focused very heavily on access to information, language, and translation of that information online to the public. We continue to make improvements to how we process utility bills and business licenses and many other transactions that members of the public, customers, the public, visitors, sort of improve the experience of that transaction with the city. We've implemented online services to allow people to remit and pay their bills online, pay with a credit card. We're trying to reduce the amount of checks that people have to write, being able to have to put information in envelopes and mail it to us. We're just really focused on streamlining and improving the customer experience for how people do business with the city. And we've also initiated transient occupancy tax and cannabis tax audits. This is something that we can do. We are doing everything we can to try and maximize the revenue from our existing revenue sources. And by having a robust audit program is a very core way of allowing us to achieve that. Both of those audits are underway, and we have worked very closely with the cannabis and the hotel industries on answering their questions and being very transparent about the purpose, the scope, the timeline of these audit programs. Again, those are underway. We do have challenges that we are currently facing. One is just customer service demands, and it's not just demands from customers that we serve in the public, but also our internal customers, like the city attorney's office. We provide support to every other city department as well, and so they all have demands and needs for us, and we want to be able to accommodate and achieve their goals as well. In regards to the work that we do with our budget process, we do have sort of uncertain economic forecasts and uncertain economic trends going forward, a lot of which we talked about today. And so really trying to understand that and articulate that in our budget information with council so that we are transparent and talk about those challenges. One of our major goals is to making sure that we do achieve your council-approved reserve policy target level, and so making sure that we focus on that and we talk about the potential changes. And then other challenges we have are just making sure we're meeting all of our compliance requirements from the federal, the state governments, local governments. We have a lot of requirements in regards to grants that we receive, our reporting requirements, the way that we produce our financial statements. And this is all additional workload and work that is not funded by any of those entities. And the finance department has had to reduce staffing over the past couple of years in order to achieve our own expenditure reduction targets. And so we are required to work smarter. We're required to utilize technology to streamline our business processes so that we can meet those compliance requirements. We'll be prioritizing additional technology initiatives going forward. First and foremost, we're hoping to implement an electronic way of paying our vendors. Currently, we print checks and mail them to the vast majority of all of the people that do business with the city. And we want to implement a better service for them. It'll allow them to get paid quicker in a more secure, efficient way, and it will reduce our operating costs by being able to achieve that project. We will be issuing debt for the police facility in fiscal year 2025. That will be a major initiative led by the finance department and city attorney and many other staff. We're hoping to standardize the use of credit cards. So it's just the way people do business now, right? They pay their bills online with credit cards. And so we're hoping to standardize the use of credit cards across the city. And there is a revenue component to that. We do get rebate revenue from the proliferation of the use of credit cards, and it will allow for more efficient procurement of our goods and services also. And then just making sure all of our systems are integrated. Everything kind of ties into the financial system in one way, shape, or form. And so we want to make sure that those ancillary systems are being tied in efficiently, securely, in a secure way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Males for the fire department.
Chief?
Good morning, everyone. Chris Males, your fire chief. Just wanted some high-level overview of the fire department. We have staffing of 106 full-time equivalent personnel. Of those personnel, 87 work on fire engines, and then we have an additional 7 fire personnel that are fire prevention centric. So of our 106, we have 94 personnel that are really focused on the field. Our budget is $35 million. Of which about 90% of that is salary and benefits, with just less than 3% being discretionary funding to the department. Fiscal 24 highlights, the fire department responded to 11,560 calls for service. That is increasing each year. We started our first vegetation management crew, 5-person crew that was funded by 2 successful grants that we received, one from the Coastal Conservancy and one from CAL FIRE. Those grants were obtained with our strong partnership with Parks and Recreation. The one field crew has completed their work and will be hiring another crew soon. We successfully received 2 new fire apparatus through our first-time lease purchase. Those apparatus are stationed at Stations 5 on Modoc Road and Station 1 downtown. Looking forward to the challenges of fiscal year 24, we need to be continually focused on the ever-present fires, floods, and calamities that hit our region. We are also needing to look toward the procurement of additional fire apparatus. This is becoming increasingly difficult. Our fire apparatus have increased in price over the last 2 years by nearly 30%. So large price increase. Luckily, we have 2 that are in the queue that did see some increase in cost, but the cost has even gone up even more since we purchased the last 2. We are preparing for our move to the Regional Fire Communications Facility, which was approved by Council. This is a large lift, both operationally within our department, but also training. It's going to truly revolutionize the way that our fire apparatus are dispatched throughout the city and the region. We are continuing our succession planning and leadership development. We are looking at a nearly 50% turnover in personnel in the next 5 years if we look at pending service retirements. So We have a desperate need to continue this long-term vision of preparing our future leaders. Our fiscal year 25 priorities, we will be implementing the standards of cover study. There has been a bit of a delay on that study, not the fault of the consultant, but we needed to look a little bit more deeply into some of our response time numbers, which were really influenced, I think, to a great extent by COVID. So we took another fresh look at our response time numbers, which I think are going to be more representative of our actual numbers. Again, a priority after July will be to move to the regional fire training facility. We will be running an academy in fiscal year 25. In the 31 years that I've been here, we typically hire 6 plus or minus up to 10 or 12 every 2 years. So we ran an academy about a year and a half ago. We'll be running another academy in July. We also need to work on our recruitment and training for our EOC staffing. As you know, we pull personnel from all departments to help us in the EOC, and we will be focusing on training additional staff for the EOC. And then we're going to be looking more extensively at firefighter wellness. There are a number of initiatives that I think are going to help our department and help our personnel have a long and very healthy career. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll go to Human Resources. Ms. Levy.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. I'm Wendy Levy. I am the HR Director. Happy to be here to talk a little bit about HR. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll make it really brief. As you know, HR is the backbone of an organization. We touch every single employee from the beginning of their career with us to their separation or the end of their career with us. So we are the backbone of the organization. We touch everybody. It's a very important function, and we do so with a very small staff. We are small but mighty with a staff of 11. And when one person is gone, the rest of us pick up the slack. So at any rate, about a $2.8 million budget, 2.9. Some of the highlights over the past year that I want to bring to your attention. We kicked off the classification and compensation study. We are in midstream of those efforts. We are anticipating a draft recommendation sometime around July of this year. So it's a very exciting time for us because this is a change that has been 30 years in the making. So very exciting times. Additionally, we kicked off our Balance U program, which is a wellness program that stretches across the city. We have had 500 participants in the program, and this consists of webinars, interactive activities, and there will be more to come as we go throughout the year. We have had, as you well know, thanks to your help, successful labor negotiations for multiple groups. This is a really important component of what we do in human resources, and we want to make sure we have labor peace, and thus far we have very good partnerships with our labor partners, and so fostering that relationship, maintaining that goes to our successful negotiations. And finally, a really big focus on employee engagement and DEIA programs. Based on Vision 2030, one of the pillars is a thriving workforce. And so to do that, that takes employees to participate. So with our engagement, we seek the insight, the help, and the recommendations of multiple work groups who come together and think of creative and innovative ways to program what we do, how we make people feel. So it's a really, really important program. We are striving to bring recommendations forward, and it's something that we are hyper-focused on right now. Some of the challenges we have, being a small department, of course, our workload is really, really high. We don't have an opportunity to really slack off, which we wouldn't anyway, even if we did. But so with a staff of 10 right now, the workload from the class and comp study is just really, really heavy. And so that is a lot of our time in addition to the normal kind of everyday work that we accomplish. As far as the Balance U program, the wellness program, ongoing funding is always a a concern of ours. This is a really important program. Wellness is one of those things that all employees look forward to for their organizations to provide. We want a holistic kind of experience for the employees, and so maintaining the funding for that is really important. Of course, there are outside factors that impact the human resources function because we talk about salaries, compensation, benefits. So it's all of those inflationary type components that do impact what we do, be it the cost of living, housing, all of those things. And all of our benefits have fiscal impacts. So it's one of our major challenges. Another thing that we're hearing is that employees are stretched really thin, heavy workloads, and that kind of goes along with our vacancy rates and what people are doing. How do we cram more into one day, into one person? And so I'm happy to say that our vacancy rate has decreased significantly from where we were during the COVID years. And our turnover rate is actually very, very low right now. So we are recuperating and recovering from COVID and really are almost at a normal pace for where we are in vacancies. Some of our priorities in the coming months and years are classification and compensation study, both the development of a compensation philosophy that is clear, understood, and broadcast out so that people understand where we are in the market is a really important component of any compensation structure. Not only that, but the implementation of the classification and compensation study is also important to ensure that we are market-driven, competitive, and also fiscally sound. Our Balance You program, keeping that going, growing that, making sure that is a constant in our environment is really important. We want to, again, make sure people are holistically taken care of. We have a number of MOUs that are expiring this coming year and the next, and so focusing on making sure that we are fiscally responsible with your help in formulating those negotiation talks. And then another one of the pillars for Vision 2030 is ensuring that employees have the tools and resources that they need to do their jobs. Not only sufficiently, but effectively. And so that will be a high focus of what we are doing, both with the results of the employment engagement survey, as well as our work groups. And then finally, of course, in human resources, we are the recruitment function. So how do we reduce vacancies and even more so retain staff? We hire the best, we hire quality, and so we want to make sure that we can hang on to folks as long as we can. And with that, I am complete.
Thank you. We'll move on to information technology.
Mayor, members of council, I am Justin Cure, IT Director. The IT department consists of 31 full-time and 2 hourly employees. We are a rate-funded intra-city service fund with a $10 million budget. Our teams consist of help desk support, infrastructure, applications, electronic communications, geographic information systems, and administration. Our highlights for fiscal year '24 include the city's new constituent relationship management system, SB Connect. SB Connect better connects the community to the services and specific departments they need. This includes the ability to report issues and make service requests with ease. As you can see from the numbers on the bottom, we have already received over 1,600 SB Connect requests to date. Another highlight for the year includes technology centralization of several areas of the organization. This includes the move of the electronic communications team from Public Works and 1 electronic communications staff member from the airport. Electronic communications provides many important technology functions, including our public safety radio network, telecommunications, physical security, including access control and security cameras. We also add 2 full-time and 2 hourly geographic information systems, or GIS staff, join us from Public Works and Community Development. This important move sets us up for the full utilization of GIS throughout the organization and the implementation of our GIS strategic plan that I will talk about shortly. The IT department also created and implemented a service level agreement, or an SLA, with the departments we serve. And SLA communicates the elements and commitments in place to provide consistent IT service support and delivery to all departments. Includes a clear reference to support times, clear and measurable description of service to departments and their responsibilities, and this assures the alignment with expected service to the actual support. IT staff are resolving 94.6% of our SLA requests, which exceeds the agreed upon service level. Last highlight I'd like to share is the creation of the city's first 5-year GIS strategic plan. GIS efforts have been ongoing for many years here at the city, and it's relied on for visualization, analytics, and daily operations. Departments have made it very clear that they would like to see GIS expanded and fully adopted. This 5-year plan will allow for that. Some challenges for fiscal year 24 include refining the centralization effort by aligning our new team members to our existing processes and procedures within IT. This includes how we handle project management, support documentation. We also spent a huge amount of time bringing the electronic communications budget into the IT budget. Change management has also been challenging. We've been making a large number of changes to many of our systems. We'll continue to do that as we bring our technologies to a modern state, but this can also often be disruptive to our employees. So we're focusing on training, clear communication to help alleviate those frustrations. 2 years ago, when I first started, we implemented IT governance, which is simply a set of processes that ensure that our IT initiatives are strategically aligned with the organization's business goals. With any new process, you can have challenges that aren't identified until the process is in place. These revolve around proper vetting and communication, and it has impacted our project and support work efforts with departments. You'll notice it's a priority to resolve for fiscal year 25, and we're already focused on that effort. Our final challenge is the volume of projects we're implementing. We have 24 projects we're currently working on and 44 slated for next year. We've established a detailed project management methodology combined with our efforts in change management and IT governance, which will clearly define our capacity for projects in the future. Our priorities for next year include a review of our current telecommunications. This could include an upgrade to some of our current systems, additional technologies, or a combination of both. City process modernization is also a focus for next year, and this is around the projects and tools we have implemented to improve workflows and processes throughout the organization. Some examples include employee onboarding, permitting, constituent engagement, contract management. We're also continuing our focus on cybersecurity with updated training and infrastructure improvements. Physical security will also be an emphasis this next year with several upgrades and expansions planned. As mentioned, we'll continue to improve upon IT governance to ensure we are managing the technology resources we've been entrusted with as efficiently as possible. And that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move to the library. Ms. Caliente.
Good morning. Jessica Caliente, your library director. I have a lot to say, so I'm just going to get started this morning. So for the library, I would like to remind us of our mission. We are dedicated to supporting education for all ages through classes and events, building a community of readers, empowering individuals with free access to information, and connecting people to community resources. The free is the important part there. For FY24 highlights, reopening 7 days a week. So thank you. Thank you to council for supporting that. And I'm proud to report that by October of 23, we were fully back open 7 days a week. And with that 7-day-a-week opening, we have seen tens of thousands of more people through our doors, computer sessions, Wi-Fi sessions, checkouts. And those numbers will only continue to increase as the construction ends and people realize that we are truly open. Enhanced safety and incident response training for staff. So this is the most important topic in libraries today, more important than banned books, because it is our people and our public in our buildings every day, and how do we prepare them for that? So at the library this year, we have instituted quarterly staff trainings to address recent issues, concerns, and areas for refresher training. We offer biannual de-escalation training. We are leading in this area as we had a team of staff go to the California Library Association conference and present on best practices when delivering rules of conduct in the library and creating staff-supported spaces. Going forward, we will be enhancing our onboarding training focused on safety and security, self-care, trauma-informed library services, and pre-escalation techniques. So how to prevent the incident from happening before it even starts to happen. And then integration of community connections into all facets of library work. So community connections is where our staff work to connect our community to the vital resources. It's often difficult for community members to navigate the different bureaucracies, and that is what Community Connections is. It is where our FSA worker is housed, and because we only have one of these workers, we must integrate this into everything that we do. So we start by having all staff trained annually on community resource navigation with the FSA contracted worker. We have FSA contracted staff present at library programs where they can connect informally with patrons to understand needs and to connect to services. FSA contracted staff work with library staff to implement programs that support health and wellness, nutrition and food, education and career resources, and housing. These programs are developed in response to community needs, and they are often in English and Spanish, including programs like diabetes education and screening with Sansom Diabetes Clinic, Medi-Cal enrollment fairs, immigration resource fairs, and family literacy events. All of these happened recently, and I hope that you were able to join us. And again, this model of community connection really reduces the barriers to accessing needed services and builds collaborative relationships between organizations and community members to foster resilience in our community. And then finally, our fourth highlight for FY24 is expanded Spanish language programming and outreach. This is an area that the library has really focused over the last few years, creating our Spanish outreach team. 23% of programming at the library is bilingual, and 20 to 25% of all SBPL Works appointments and services are for Spanish speakers. We prioritize translating our website content, so nearly 100% of the library subsite is translated into Spanish. And we now offer simultaneous translation equipment to be able to make English programs available in Spanish as appropriate. Now, looking at our challenges, probably don't have to list the number one bullet there, construction. We are a year behind schedule, and that is what it is. This has forced staff to work in our programming spaces, impacting both the events that we're able to host at the library, as well as our rental revenue going into FY24. We did think that we would have our plaza online going into this fiscal year, and so that revenue has not been actualized. Supervisor vacancies, and really all vacancies. You know, we've had a youth services supervisor vacant since March of 23. We've talked a lot about how we grow our staff internally, and we've just exhausted our bench at this point. And really a lot of thanks to Molly Wetta for backfilling that as the manager in the library. Looking at regional cooperation, we have lost a lot of economies of scale with the splintering of the county libraries. We no longer purchase things together as a collective. We are all purchasing things individually, and that is a challenge. And so that goes into sustaining a collection budget from multiple formats. That has become very difficult to do, as we now have 5 library zones in this county, and they all differ on priority in terms of how they are managing their collection budget. But for us in particular, we had $600,000 budgeted in FY20. We're going into this year with just over $300,000. So everything is costing more, and we're buying fewer books, even on a status quo budget. Increasing patron usage, especially since reopening, including Hoopla. If we were to budget to keep Hoopla at status quo for FY25, we would need $204,000 just for that one platform. Licensing models for digital books continue to be difficult for public libraries, and the state as you know, is having budget issues as well. And so popular platforms that are being paid for by the state, like LinkedIn Learning, New York Times, Coursera, BrainFuse, all are at risk of being removed. And in last year's budget, we said that we need $750,000 to meet the needs of the community, and that only continues to increase. Going into our FY25 priorities. We've had a lot of fun this last year doing our teen internship programs, which are paid programs at the library. We really want to work on refining those and making them more streamlined. We want to expand the college and career readiness programming and partnership work with the school district. We want to grow capacity to support the volunteer opportunities that have been proven to be very needed by the students in our community. The Community Schools Partnership with Santa Barbara Unified School District. This is a collaborative effort between the school district and community organizations to identify neighborhood-specific needs at school sites and to have community engagement response. The library was asked to join as a key partner. The East Side Master Plan and maintaining the library hours post-ARPA funding at East Side. So we need to complete a master plan of that entire East Side campus, incorporating nearby schools and community centers to support accessibility, improve programming spaces, outreach garage, and sustainability and ADA needs. And we need to continue our collaboration with Sustainability and Resilience and the county to make the East Side Library a resilience hub. We did receive a grant to do this work, and so we're excited to finish it. And then we need to secure adequate funding to maintain the 6 days a week. We will go back to 5 days once the ARPA funding dries up on that one position. And then looking to seek regional collection issue solutions, hoping to find the other libraries in the county willing to meet us at the table to talk about those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go to Parks and Recreation. Ms. Zachary.
Mayor Rouse, members of City Council, I'm going to whiz through our slide and hopefully give you a good outlook on our highlights, challenges, and looking ahead to 2025. Parks and Recreation has 82 permanent staff and 235 hourly staff. Our budget in the general fund is $25 million, and in the Gulf Fund is $5 million. Of our general fund budget, $8 million of that comes from departmental revenues, so revenues that the department is responsible for generating. I'd also like to highlight our mission because I think it fits quite neatly into Council's priorities of quality of life. Our mission is to promote community vitality, health, and safety, provide equitable access to parks, beaches, trails, and recreation facilities, ensure stewardship of open spaces, the urban forests, and the delivery of high-quality programs and community cultural services. When we look at our highlights for fiscal year 24, I think one of the big ones are the major turf renovations that we achieved in 10 of our parks. Some of these parks had not been touched for decades, and thanks to the ARPA funding, we made them safer and more sustainable to maintain. So it's not just a one-time, it's ongoing. In fiscal year 2024, we also have secured to date $4.5 million in grant funding. A big chunk of that is our collaborative work with the fire department, but also for capital projects in 5 of our city parks. We really consider reinvestment and city park infrastructure as a high priority, so we advanced and are advancing 12 key projects that will have results in this fiscal year. The renovation of the East Side Neighborhood Park is the one that we can remember most recently, but we also completed a complete renovation of the Alameda Bandstand in Alameda Plaza. We undertook upgrades to Cabrillo Pavilion, Plaza Veracruz, Parque de los Niños. We're in the process of the upgrades to the Plaza Del Mar Bandshell. We advanced the planning efforts for Ortega Park, Dwight Murphy, Chase Palm Park, and then also more recently completing the Parma Park Sustainable Trails Project, which has been underway for many years and is funded through the Parma Park Trust. Looking at challenges this year, and really fiscal year 23 and 24 kind of bleed together in some of our challenges. We had storms in 23, we have storms this year. It's resulted in damage to our facilities. We actually had to vacate 620 Laguna because of the flood damage. We had flood damage ongoing at Muni Tennis. We began to lose more of our beloved shoreline park with the bluff erosion that we have. The amount of debris that's on our city beaches is extensive, and so that detracts from our ability to do other park maintenance work, trying to address that. We've also had trail erosion in different areas, and luckily we work closely with a collaborative group of trail organizations to actually address those things. And then I think even long-term, and this will probably come up in waterfront as well, the amount of sand that we've lost in Santa Barbara is significant. And the ability and anticipating maybe that won't come back with the coastal storms that we have and sea level rise will change how we use our beach areas. Looking at, as I mentioned in the earlier, the opportunities or the successes, our challenges is the need to reinvest in our infrastructure. You know, when we look at our 60 parks, our diverse facilities, many of our buildings are historic structures, which we love, but they're very expensive to renovate. And then we have a number of other areas that are aging. Even our park restrooms, the need to replace those. Our park parking lots are falling apart. We have structural concerns at Los Baños. We've been trying to find the solution to the West Beach wading pool. We have structural issues at the municipal tennis stadium. So there's lots of these things that are really challenges that we face, but also we look at them as opportunities. We have about 25 different projects we're trying to advance right now that would address this infrastructure shortfall. As always, we continue to be challenged by park mixed use and safety concerns, vandalism that also costs the city a lot of money to address when we have to go in and fix restrooms. We have to go deal with graffiti and other damage that we have. And then lastly, and looking at our challenges, it's youth services. You know, the department has more than 100 years of history providing recreation services in this community. We recognize that city resources are finite and increasingly limited. We also face changing regulations. We can no longer transport kids in vans. There's things that we can't do that we used to do. So even when we had the funding for the free after-school sports program, it's impossible to move kids from point A to point B. Recruitment challenges are a big deal as well for us, not having the teenagers and the young adults to provide these services. We've continued to find ways to raise our hourly wages, and with the minimum wage and also what's happening in other areas of the commercial world, we're looking at that again. When we raise those wages, we have to raise our fees. And so that also creates a disparity between the children that can and the children that can't participate in our programs. We try to solve some of that by providing scholarships and working with the Campership Alliance, developing grant programs to bring in free opportunities for families and youth that can no longer support that. It's a concern to us as well because we also provide employment. So if we're unable to provide these programs and services, we're unable to bring tomorrow's generation of professionals into their first jobs. Looking ahead to our priorities for fiscal year 25, some of the top ones include going back to that wildland resiliency work. It's amazing that we have these resources. We will be working in 18 open spaces in the city of Santa Barbara, and we have never had that kind of resource. We're looking at hopefully securing a significant amount of grant funds to come back in afterward and do a lot of habitat enhancement and habitat recovery in those same spaces, which goes part and parcel with not just tree removal and brush, but actually creating a more sustainable environment. So the costs over time to maintain these spaces should decrease and their resiliency should be maintained. We have a number of initiatives with our urban forest management plan, including developing park master plans. We're revamping our street tree designation process. We've also advanced tree planting in unique areas, such as around our playgrounds, and that will continue. Through our park planning initiatives, we'll be integrating, enhancing biodiversity in our parks, not just open spaces, but also we've got spaces in our urban developed parks that are underutilized, so we could look at ways to enhance the biodiversity there. In addition to the many capital projects we have underway, a high priority will be hopefully moving forward with construction of the Dwight Murphy Field renovation project, completing the interior renovations of the Louise Lowry Davis Center. It's been closed for far too long. And then also completion of the long-awaited renovation of the Carrillo Gym. Lastly, just to sum it all up, community partnerships are key to the success of our department and support for community recreation and social services. We work with more than 120 organizations in various capacities. Maintaining those relationships, advancing those relationships, building on those will allow Parks and Recreation, the city, to support so much that goes on in the community that we don't directly have to provide that service. We can be part of leveraging that service. And with that, I'll just sound it out with our special events. It's something we love to talk about. We have revamped our special events process the last couple of years. Last year, we permitted 150 different special events in the city of Santa Barbara. And these are events that others do, some larger ones that the city supports, but realizing and wanting to maintain our ability to do that efficiently and effectively, because it not only serves our community, but it brings visitors to Santa Barbara and why they enjoy that. With that, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the Police Department. Chief Gordon.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse, City Council members. So I guess it's a great problem to have as a chief to actually struggle to figure out and narrow down your highlights. So these are just a small section of the highlights for the last year. One that's not on there but that was already mentioned is all the work with the Fire and Police Commission that you'll hear about in our next week. But really some of the things internally that we've really been leaning into is we've expanded our wellness program. We're doing, getting ready to start individual mental health check-ins. We now have an on-duty fitness program where all staff, not just sworn, gets 30 minutes twice a week at least to do something. Doesn't have to be a heavy workout, but something that is physically active. And we have a program and an app and all sorts of fun stuff to track that and to do that process. We've had increased training. So over the last year, external training, we've had over 8,000 hours of external training. That was one of our goals, was to really lean into that training. It's something that we'll talk about again next week because it has a direct correlation with the numbers that you'll see next week in terms of complaints. We've increased our co-response to 2 teams, and now we have the ability for our co-response teams and our community action teams to write mental health holds. We have improved our hiring practices. You'll see it's also will be a continued challenge and a continued priority, but we hired 10 new officers this last year and 19 professional staff. We've decreased our vacancy rate to just under 14%. I don't want to jinx myself. We only currently have 1 vacancy in dispatch. And if we hire our last until one of our dispatchers goes into the police academy, we'll be hopefully full for a short amount of time. We're up to 9 of our 12 parking enforcement officers. So we've done a considerable amount of hiring. We've completely revamped how we've done that. We've worked hand in hand with HR in order to accomplish this. And we're continuing to lean into that. As you see, that is also then part of our challenges for next year. We will continue to improve our recruitment and hiring. We're really focused on hiring locally and really pushing into that part of what we do and how we do it. We've had a significant challenge in technology implementation. We've spent a lot of time, we're doing new body cams, but with technology implementation comes a lot of challenges as well. We've had 2 retirements within our IT department of long-term, which I'm happy to say we are now fully staffed and have hired for, but the process of implementing all of the new technology has been a challenge. Special event and First Amendment staffing. As was just mentioned in the previous, the number of special event and First Amendment events staff, that's great that we're doing more special events, but that requires a lot more staffing on the police department. You know, times have changed significantly, even what it takes us to appropriately provide security for, such things at the film festival and other things that are, fiesta, that are staples here in our community, but we have to have a appropriate response to that and planning with that. So that is a challenge for us within our current staffing. 25, as we're looking into it, retention and recruitment. So we're continuing to work through that and to look into that. As part of our work with the Fire and Police Commission, we're looking at how we're going to use BI to do a public mission strategy dashboard so that we can also provide more of the information that we are presenting to Fire and Police Commission and quarterly statistics, and be able to put that out front for the public as well. We're going to do an updated career development plan. As Chief Mills talked about, retirements are coming. We have a number of them coming up for us, so continuing to have an updated succession and career planning plan is going to be really extremely important for us. Our Explorer program, we haven't had our Explorer program in a few years because of staffing and COVID and a number of things. We really want to get that program reinitiated in '25. So that's going to be, part of that driving force with staffing is continuing to lead into our youth programs, because that's extremely important. Like I said, it was hard to pick our highlights. We've really done a lot of work to become more engaged with the community, our number of social media posts, our number of community events. We've already done 2 Spanish community academies this year. So all of those things are building for our success moving into '25. So on the other side of things, when it comes to the other things we do, we have seen a decrease in crime, which is a good thing. I know that public perception makes it seem like maybe it's an increase, but our numbers show that we've had a decrease in violent crime and property crime. So that's also a very good thing for us, is seeing that at the same time, an actual decrease in our crime rates. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to Public Works. Director Maurer.
Morning, Honorable Mayor and council members. Because of the breadth of the Public Works program, I actually have 3 slides. I apologize. You're going to have to put up with me a little bit longer than the other directors. At the header of each slide are the numbers for the area that's covered by that slide. So just in total, Public Works has 295 full-time employees, 160 hourlies. That adds up to 455 personnel, or about 375 FTE, and our total volume of business from many different revenue sources, small amount general fund, of course, Measure C, grants, and other tax revenue sources adds up to a little under $200 million a year. So I'm going to kick off with called Public Works Downtown. The name's a little bit of a misnomer. It consists of the downtown parking and plaza team and our transportation planning group. They truly cover the entire city, but their most operational impact is from the west side, State Street Business Corridor, all the way up to North State, east side, Milpas Business Corridor, and then out to Coast Village Road. That's where most of their impact is at. We continue to service that entire area, but underserved communities. In '24, we completed the Lower East Side Community Connectivity Plan. We've updated our traffic model. That's not a real exciting thing, but it's a real important thing as far as it comes to future planning and understanding where we do have development, how it's going to impact our circulation plan. I like Public Works to be as collaborative and cross-functional as possible. And as you know, the city is lucky to have a tremendous traffic engineering team, and they participate greatly in that to identify current needs and ensure our circulation element is at its best. You also know, you know all too well, we've been working very hard on the outdoor dining facility and parklet programs. We've now launched a license program and continue to try to improve upon that. I'd like to call out one other. If you look at in the numbers all the way on the bottom right, for the most recent film festival, we are anticipating selling a little less than 100 parking passes for that event. Through great outreach and work between Ms. Clark and her team, we ended up selling 434, which was a big lift for the team to actually print all those passes and issue them all. But on the positive side, when we did some informal analysis, we saw that people were using those passes outside the times of events, which is exactly what we want. That's a force multiplier for our business community because now people have the passes. They say, my parking's paid for, I'm going downtown, I'm going to go to restaurants, shop, whatever. So that's great. The challenges are huge. I know you're all aware we are looking at a $3.8 million deficit in our downtown parking enterprise fund in the upcoming year, and that doesn't even include the capital that should be in there that we're deferring. So that is a big number that we're going to have to work at. I'll get to that in a second. As you heard from Director DiMartini, our business growth is flat downtown. Certainly we serve the retail and business community, food and beverage community downtown, and that's a struggle because people aren't paying for additional parking because we're not seeing growth in that area. The biggest challenge is there is just too much free curbside parking. And we've done a lot of analysis, and just a quick takeaway of all our downtown parkers, given that we have free periods and we have free curbside parking, less than 30% of the people that pay for parking carry 100% of the parking load. So less than 30%. So that is something that we just have to get at. So obviously going forward, our priority is to address that financial concern. Fortunately, our downtown parking committee is staffed with some incredibly sharp community and business-minded people, and we have been working very closely with a lot of options, so you'll be hearing more about that over the next 2 months. Another priority on the transportation planning side is our Safe Streets for All planning effort. We have a $800,000 grant that we'll be implementing this coming year. It'll address safe routes to school, continue to improve that. Vision Zero, of course, our bike and pedestrian master plans. And then finally, this is going to require a lot of community outreach because I know there's a demographic that's resistant to going full technology with our parking, but we really can't continue to run with the numbers we're looking at, multiple systems. So we're going to work hard at communicating the goodness of leveraging technology to lower our costs. If I could go to the next slide, please. Public Works Operations. This is a bit of a catch-all. It includes our 2 internal professional services divisions, Public Works Administration, of course, with our analysts, and then our engineering team. In addition to that, then we have our core Public Works delivery team, facilities, fleet, and streets, and of course, storm drain infrastructure. The highlights is, as you've heard from many other directors, monumental effort in response to the storms we've experienced. And although, we certainly had great challenges, I think we came through it very well. The next bullet there, centralization of project management, really engineering services. With your approval, we hired a new principal architect, Craig Schallenberger. In the months he's been on board, he's been very impactful, really in day-to-day operations as we move forward into next fiscal year. Really want to leverage his skills strategically, teaching other project managers what he knows so that we can express that across our entire organization and help better support all the departments. We have several construction projects that are significantly behind schedule. There's a lot of factors involved there, but we can do better internally and aim to do so. Always thankful for your support to the paving program. I'll tell you, we've had a great year. Every dollar programmed for paving in FY24 will be spent this year. which is really important. Give confidence to the people that making that commitment and obligation, we're fulfilling it, and it's being done with really high quality, I think, as you know. And we also initiated our storm drain condition assessment, and that's being done internally right now. For many years, we were in drought. People weren't paying a lot of attention to storm drain infrastructure. They are now. So we've got a lot of work to do there, and just jumping forward, I think, as you know, there's a good side and a bad side to doing an infrastructure assessment. It's something that we need to do, but it's also going to result in a bunch of unfunded requirements that really, and probably not in FY25, but into our next 2-year budget, that's going to be take a lot of brain power to figure out how we're going to get after that, because I know there's a huge demand for that. On our challenges side, we have a limited number of bidders. Low competition is never good for any organization, so we're paying attention to that. Hopefully people are out voting today. We're anxious to find out what the result of Measure A, and hopefully that can be very impactful to helping that situation. Internally, our knowledge of our facility asset condition and the way we address it is pretty reactive. And that is something that with the reorganization within the Public Works Operations Division, we're going to really address. I'll talk about that in a second. And then again, just kind of hitting on the storm intensity. It's not only the pressure it's putting on our infrastructure, and you see again down the bottom right, 1.3 inches of rain in 1 hour on December 21st. And I believe, and Chief Males can probably correct me here, almost an inch of that happened in a half an hour. There's no storm drain collection and transportation infrastructure probably in the country that can handle that type of tropical monsoonal downpour. That's concerning, because if it was a one-off, 1 in 100, 1 in 200 years, okay, we experienced it, we'll never see it again. Well, we've had similar, 3 big events in 13 months. That is concerning. It's something we're going to have to address. And then, of course, as we identify these requirements, it takes resources. So we need to be creative on that respect. I already talked about the first 2 in the FY25 priorities. I'll jump down to implementing facilities maintenance action plan. The IT department has done a great job of putting SB Connect in place. It's not only an outward-looking program, it is very effective internal as well. And over the next year, we're going to leverage that. We're going to put a facilities maintenance action plan in place to put better work induction to understand what needs to be done, prioritize it, and be more effective in our response to lower costs. And then, as always, finally, my ever plug to stay the course for our pavement condition index, to push that over the next 10 to 12 years to 75. Most likely you won't be in these seats, but the people who are in your seats will be forever grateful for that long-term commitment and the return on investment that'll deliver the city. My final slide, water resources. I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time here, because you just 1 week ago heard extensive discussion about our upcoming rates for water and wastewater. And all the background as to why they're challenging. I will start off on the highlights. We fully implemented the advanced metering infrastructure, or better known as AMI, and the smart customer portal. it is a fantastic tool. It's great for us to understand where water usage is at levels where it's not supposed to be, and we can address it. It's customer friendly, ratepayer friendly. They can take a look, and people can make adjustments to their water usage very simply using that technology. Of course, the downside is the upside, we want people to conserve. That's a long-term good thing for the city, for the environment. The downside is when they conserve, we lose revenue, and that's a challenge. And that's what's in a way pushing the rates up as well. For our challenges, certified or credentialed water, blue-collar workforce, highly technical, are in huge demand. And we compete with neighboring water districts, both north and south of us. And right now, we have, for the last year, we have had perpetually 6 vacancies in our water distribution team. And it's, as Ms. Levy said, it's really hard on the remaining workforce to cover down on that number of vacancies. And there's a real challenge because districts, in many cases, can offer better salaries than we can. So we are working hard to remedy that. Also, as Mr. DeMartini said, the inflation has hit us really hard. I think that on the capital side, that's been exacerbated by the fact that we have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really the first bipartisan infrastructure bill for the country in decades. And there's a lot of work out there, and the construction industry is not that elastic that people can stand up new companies, so that the ones that are existing with reputations and capabilities are in high demand, and that raises prices pretty significantly. With all that said, though, we're coming back to Water Commission in 2 weeks, March 21st, and given what we discussed at council just a week ago, we took your concerns and very seriously, and have been working extraordinarily hard to find ways to drive those rates down some. There's no way I can promise a significant reduction, but I do think in 2 weeks you'll see a good faith effort to bring them down a little bit. And we will continue to do that all the way through this process until we settle on the rates where they may fall out. Just to quickly wrap up, our priorities for 25, of course, is, as I mentioned, about the recruitment and retention of our certified workers, really, really important. And then we got some big capital projects up at Cater Water Treatment Plant, the Reserve Resiliency Project, and then our standing 2% or pretty darn close to 2% of water main replacement because of our aging infrastructure. So that completes my presentation. I'll be available to answer questions when this is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Sustainability and Resilience. Parento.
I'm substantially shorter than Mr. Mauer. Good morning, council members and Mr. Mayor. Alelia Parento, your Sustainability and Resilience Director. And I'm here to talk to you about our FY24 highlights, challenges, and future priorities. So first and foremost, as your newest or one of your newest departments, I wanted to clarify who we consist of. This statement did get a little jumbled, so I will further clarify it. We consist of 3 operational divisions, including the Clean Community Division, which was formerly known as Environmental Services. We also the Creeks and Water Quality Division and the Energy and Climate Division, which operates Santa Barbara Clean Energy. And then we have a 4th sort of internal service division within our department, which is our Community Engagement Division. The focus of all of these divisions is to support and hopefully accelerate the organization's sustainability and resilience efforts, working in concert with the other departments you've already heard from to ensure a clean, safe, and thriving community. We currently have 30 full-time staff and 7 hourly staff and a $100 million budget consisting of enterprise and special funds. The enterprise funds are related to solid waste and electricity rates, and the special funds are Measure B. So some of our highlights, just like everyone else, this was really challenging to pare down this list, but I wanted to call attention to the climate action plan that the team has been diligently working on for nearly 3 years. It should be coming to your council by the end of this fiscal year for adoption, and it really is the work plan of the Energy and Climate Division and some of the other work happening in our department. This is also the first step in achieving Council's goal of carbon neutrality by 2034 or 35 and will be a really important roadmap for us. Additionally, the Marburg contract, though officially adopted in FY23, we began its implementation this year. This contract completely changed the financial interactions between Marburg and the city and also added a significant number of new services that were offered, including the household hazardous waste program that was just undertaken last Saturday and was hugely successful. We also launched Santa Barbara Clean Energy's first self-funded incentive, the electric vehicle purchase or lease incentive. And in the first 2 months of the program have had over 50 SBC customers take advantage. We look forward to having a lot more take advantage in the future. And we are currently diligently working on a new sustainability and resilience subsite, which will help connect the community to the programs and policies that our department is undertaking. In terms of challenges, we've had a few, including some Department of Industrial Relations prevailing wage determinations for some of our Clean SB and street sweeping programs, which will dramatically change our ability to deliver those programs. We're navigating that process and it's ongoing, so we will come back to you as related to the budget. Additionally, we continue to have a volatile energy market. This is particularly impactful to our electric customers. It makes it really challenging to forecast what our rates should be into the future to ensure we're covering our capital costs. Just like everyone else before me, staff turnover and vacancies continues to plague all of our departments. We've had a significant number of legacy employees retire in this last year, and having to replace them has taken time. And then storm impacts, just like other previous departments, has also been challenging for us, creating some challenging creek conditions as well as energy resilience and delivery issues. And one challenge that's not on here but is really, really important is competing priorities within the organization. You know, it's really hard. A lot of the work that my department does is actually inspiring people to invest in a future that has not yet materialized, and that is really, really hard when you've heard all of the challenges that these departments are undertaking today. And so finding that balance continues to be a focus in an area of needed attention. In terms of our priorities in the future, we hope to expand, or we are going to expand, our Santa Barbara Clean Energy programs, continuing to look at vehicle and building electrification and equity offerings. So for ensuring that our lower income and most disadvantaged community members have access to all of our programs. We are developing language in combination with the Community Development Department and the City Attorney's Office on a creek buffer ordinance. As we've seen in this storm season, it is really dangerous to build immediately adjacent to a creek. And so we're hoping to offer some guidelines on how to mitigate that in the future. Additionally, we are expanding our material ban. We already have some single-use material bans in our municipal code and want to add some additional enforceable actions. And lastly, the Granada Garage microgrid is really a placeholder item. This is one of many projects building energy resiliency in our community. It will hopefully be complete this fiscal year, not next fiscal year, but FY25 will be the year of learning to operate the system, ensuring that the departments that occupy those buildings have their needs met, and also continuing to build energy resilience throughout the organization, including at the Cater Water Treatment Plant, like Mr. Maurer said, and some other locations. Then just really quickly to recap the numbers at the bottom, these are some big wins for our department. We continue to have 95% participation rate in Santa Barbara Clean Energy, one of the highest participation rates of any community choice energy program in the state. And that is a testament to both our community and the boldness of the council. We have picked up 88.32 tons of abandoned waste through the Clean SB program, and for those of you who think in pounds, that's 176,640 pounds, resulting from nearly 400 camps cleaned up. And we've received actually over 6.75 million. We're getting close to 10 at this point. In the last weeks, we've received a few more grants relating to sea level rise actions, microplastic research, and electric vehicle infrastructure, particularly aimed at low-income and multifamily residential charging access. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to the Waterfront Department. Mr. Wiltshire.
Hello, Mayor, council members. This is slide 66 of 68, so we're almost there. Mike Wiltshire, Waterfront Director. The waterfront is one of our city's enterprise funds, so we have really no utilization of general fund dollars. We have a staff of 46 full-time employees and anywhere from 25 to 50 hourly employees who mainly support our parking operations. Our overall operating budget is roughly $21 million. It's worth noting that the waterfront has really three major revenue sources, so those that come from our harbor slip fees, tenant rents, and parking fees, and these really make up the entirety of our revenue profile. And these revenues fully fund our operations and capital reinvestment. As far as some highlights over the last year or two, it's been said, but at the top of our list and top of mind is effective and efficient storm response. So these past 2 years were really unique from the waterfront's point of view. Not only the rain, but the swell events. These were the largest swell events to hit our coastline in a long, long time. So we responded effectively, safely, and with really minimal impacts to the business and operations down at the waterfront. And just kudos to citywide, we had support from multiple different departments. So this was truly a city effort. So thanks to Public Works, Parks and Rec, Police, Fire, who all supported the effort. Another major endeavor over the last couple of years has been cruise ship program improvements. So a huge effort, several public meetings, input from the public, Channel Keeper, Channel Islands, National Marine Sanctuary, Coast Guard, the cruise lines themselves, the Air Pollution Control District. So really just a robust evaluation of the program to look at the overall benefits, the impacts, and see where we can go with that going forward. To date, Harbor Commission has come up with over a dozen recommendations to improve the program and kind of push the industry forward and really maximize the benefits to the city and local businesses. We'll likely be bringing this back to council in early April, so in about a month we'll be bringing it back to you, to yourselves for review. Another major highlight is the waterfront's ability to replenish our reserves after COVID. That was a huge economic hit. We rely on business revenue just as our tenants do. That put us in a pretty heavy hole. So the fact that we're kind of robustly refilling our reserves, and you'll see it more in our budget presentation, but that was kind of as a best case scenario to return to a good reserve picture. Some challenges, so tenant business hardships, inflationary cost increases. It really is a difficult business climate out there for some of our tenants. So we rely heavily on their success. Their revenues from tenant rents make up about 1/3 of our waterfront revenue. So their success really is our success. So we offer rent deferrals. A lot of our tenants are in tenant improvements right now, so it's kind of the life cycle. A lot of these businesses, some of our major food service tenants are renewing their businesses for the coming years. In the short term, that means a revenue hit to us, but hopefully it helps them get on their feet, and in the long term, it results in more revenue for both them and us. Increasing costs, so it's been mentioned before, inflationary costs. Just for a little example, the insurance costs that what the waterfront pays, over a course of 5 years, our insurance bill will raise from $400,000 a year to $1.5 million a year. So that's over $1 million in cost increases with kind of no additional services provided. That's just solely our insurance bill. So that's $1 million over 5 years that we'll need to make up with fees and revenues. So just to put inflationary costs into perspective. Also a lot of work with our ocean mooring and anchorage policy. So as you know, storms hit, vessels end up on the beaches. So we're really looking at ways to hold vessel owners more accountable. We're just at the start of that process, but we might be looking into things like vessel insurance and different requirements and different policies to kind of better manage that ocean space. Priorities for FY25. Not just sea level rise, but increased storm and tide impacts. So as Ms. Zachary mentioned, our coastline's changed. This last 2 years worth of swell and storm have kind of changed the profile of what's going on down there. Really, any combination of a high tide and swell event will flood into Harbor West parking lots, Ledbetter area, Yacht Club parking lot. So we'll really leverage some grant funding, sustainability and resiliency, and our sea level rise planning to kind of help guide us what we're going to do there in the coming years. And then just more tenant business development, so working with our tenants to ensure that they can be as successful as possible going forward. And that's it for me. I'll turn it back to Mr. DeMartini.
Thank you.
So on the screen here is just a reminder to council about the recommendation to council today about receiving staff's presentation in regards to the mid-year budget cycle. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I've been getting an indication we should take a short break. So we'll make it 10 minutes max. We'll be back at 20 of, and then we'll get into questions, public comment, and recommendations. Thank you. All right, thank you for your patience. We're going to go to council questions. I'd like us, if I can ask my colleagues, we'll keep our questions very concise. We have a lot of staff sitting here that we would like to get back to their staff places. And what we'll do, as opposed to going for each council member asking all the questions, we're going to go kind of by department and see who's got questions for those departments, and those departments then can hit the road. So with that, I believe we'll start with questions for Mr. DiMartini, if from anyone has questions. And that would be Mr. Friedman.
All right, thank you. So just have a few questions. First on insurance issues. How would like large judgments against us affect us if we were to lose something in the millions of dollars on something? How is that paid for? Is that the general fund, and does that affect our insurance rates?
Councilmember Friedman, thank you so much for that question. So we typically pay judgments or claim payments. They get paid out of the city's self-insurance fund, which actually, if you go to the next slide, is the graph with the reserves. So those settlements get paid out of reserves. Now, our reserves get replenished every year through our annual budget process through allocations from other departments. So an allocation expense in the police department, as the example I gave earlier, then comes into the self-insurance fund as revenue. So we bring in revenue every year to be able to cover the cost of our premiums and the cost of claims. And those claim payments are assumed in our actuarial study. And so that's how we pay those claims. And so it's the responsibility of all the departments to contribute into the self-insurance fund. Now, we pool our resources through a joint powers agency with 11 other member agencies to achieve economies of scale so that we're purchasing our insurance programs at a reasonable cost. And then we share sort of a self-insured retention and the ability to pay those claims with those member agencies. So to answer your question, yes, if we have very, very large payments, it actually impacts the overall Joint Powers Authority, the JPA, and it will likely increase our contribution into that going forward.
Okay, and we might, because it happened once, on a specific one, if it was outside of where our reserves are, we might even have to use the general fund to help cover some of that.
Yes, Councilmember Freeman, that is correct, and we have had to do that in recent years. We have had to transfer funds from the general fund into the self-insurance fund outside of the annual budget process to make those claim payments. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then if you could pull up slide, I think it's 33. So that's 33.
Sorry.
So I just wanted to say, so overall, when we're looking forward, would you say that our revenues and expenditures are keeping pace, or are even with our revenues and property tax growing as our expenditures for a lot of reasons outgrowing them over time?
Yes, Councilmember Freeman, our ongoing revenue growth is not enough to cover our ongoing expenditure growth. In other words, every year that deficit will widen. Our revenues are growing, that is true, but they're not growing fast enough at a rate that's sustainable to cover the ongoing expenditure growth. And so you will see our revenues growing here. From just over the past couple of years, our general fund revenues grow by nearly $20 million, but our expenditures are growing at a greater rate.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to highlight. We do have revenue growth, but it's the expenditures, whether it's inflation or whatever. And we're also taking those steps for, as part of Vision 2030, to do operational efficiencies. So even with even those efficiencies, which would reduce our expenditures, they're still outpacing our revenue growth, as I understand.
Councilmember Freeman, that is correct.
And then if you could pull up slide 26.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of, we have the approximately 4.5 million, if I understand it right, in targeted reductions that we're having for the coming year, in addition to the 1.4 million, which would create a 1.4 million deficit. In those deficits, are we looking at each department doing the same percentage, or overall, like each department is responsible for 5% reduction or whatever it is? And what is that? Or are we looking at more strategically department by department? Because we've run into the issues in the past where, say, some departments, take the city clerk, for example, when it's just a couple of staff members there, it's a lot more difficult to do a 5 or 10% reduction than, say, other departments that might have some leeway. So how are we addressing those targeted reductions going forward?
Yes, Councilmember Friedman, thank you for that question. So the instructions that were given by the city administrator for the 2-year financial plan that council adopted during last year's process was to identify 2% expenditure reductions that are ongoing in fiscal year 24 and 3% expenditure reductions that are ongoing in fiscal year 25. Those are percent reductions that were applicable to every general fund funded department. So they were not targets for specific programs or specific services. They were sort of across the board percent reductions. If I can ask Ms. Glusick to go to the next slide, the value of those reductions are shown here, the first line, the target reductions. But as you can see through the budget process, through the public process, and through city council going through it, the reductions that were approved were actually a little bit lower than what those target reductions were. There were some additional resources for the library and some other functions, for example, that were sort of reinstated during the budget process last year, which sort of reduced the overall reduction amount. Now, what's being proposed in the fiscal year 25 mid-year cycle update are what was approved as part of the 2-year plan at this time. At this time, there are no additional or no changes necessarily to the expenditure reductions that are already included in the second year of the plan.
Okay, so they're already included. Okay, thank you for the clarification because, I was going to ask another question, but since you already answered it in a different way, I will move on. In the interest of time, if you could pull up slide, what is it? Let me see one here. Well, just my question is the class and comp study is coming out sometime soon. And the question with that is we have on the base budget, we have is 5.5% on salaries as part of our base that we're building the budget on that's leading to this. When is the class and comp study anticipated to be done? Then how long is it going to take us to implement those into the budget? And do we anticipate that it would change? Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was HR or finance. And specifically just on if that will impact the base budget that we're building on the 5.5%.
I can answer some of your question, Councilmember Friedman. Mayor and council members, the class and comp study should be done, we should have a draft probably by June or July. After that point, you will be presented with a recommendation from the vendor. And if those are approved by you, then we would work through the negotiation process with our unions. Each of the changes do need to be negotiated during the meet and confer process. So it will be a while, but we do have openers in our MOUs that allow for that to occur.
So in terms of the planning, now this is more maybe for Mr. DiMartini, for the planning now, we're just sticking with the 5.5%, then we'll have this other process and we might have to make adjustments based on that at a later time through negotiations and what the class and comp study will do.
Yes, Councilmember Friedman, thank you for that question. So yes, we're going with the 5.5% overall salary adjustment assumption for all salaries in the fiscal year 25 mid-year cycle update. And that's in recognition of the sort of recent trend of labor negotiations for MOUs that are getting executed. It's in recognition of that, but it's also a recognition that eventually we will work with council and our bargaining units to implement the results of that classification and compensation study. And so the timing of that is to be determined as we just talked about. But what it does is it builds our capacity in the budget itself to be able to achieve the implementation of that plan over time.
Thank you. And then there's one last question on this, and it's if you could pull up slide, trying to read my own writing here, 45. So it's just in terms of reserves. So we have the 10% contingency, then a 15% disaster. And looking back to 2008 and 9 and in 21, those appear to be we went through the contingency as I'm reading this, or close to it, and did we go into disaster reserves at any point in those?
Councilmember Freeman, in fiscal year 2008, 2009, I do not believe we were in disaster reserves at that time. We had about fully depleted the contingency reserves. There was a point in time in fiscal year 21 during COVID where we had depleted our contingency reserves and we had started dipping into our disaster reserves. And then the federal government stepped in and they legislated the ARPA legislation, and that did help us out, as we indicated on this graph.
And then the green on the fiscal year 21 on this slide, that's the ARPA, the council action. Can you remind us what we did in terms of putting that back in reserves?
Yes, Councilmember Freeman. So there were 2 tranches that we received from the ARPA legislation. The first tranche, council took an action to dedicate 100% of that money to go towards revenue replacement. And so that was an action to deposit that money into the general fund as revenue. And what that allowed the organization to do was to continue to provide those general funded functions like police and fire, park and recreation, and the library. So it was revenue that came in to replace revenue that we lost as an organization. That had a net positive effect on our reserves, because if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have that section of the green bar.
And so then going forward, our reserves, where they're pretty close now, but they would be off by a lot more, and we'd be definitely within our contingency and more closely to approaching the disaster if that hadn't happened.
Councilmember Freeman, that is correct.
And then the last question, just on this, and I'm done, is on the reserves, it looks like when we went through the contingency back in 08, 09, and 21, would you say most of that was there mostly economic pressure with COVID and back in the recession, or were they more disaster related? And I'm just trying to understand, maybe at a later time, if there's another department, when we went through our contingency, did we do that without a natural disaster? And if we had a natural disaster at the same time we went through, say, COVID, like a earthquake or a major fire that disrupted even more, would that have impacted our reserves?
Councilmember Freeman, during the economic recession of 08-09, I don't believe that there was any major natural disaster that occurred during that time period. So I believe 100% of that was due to pure economic factors with loss of revenue because of the recession that was going on at that time. During COVID, right, that was mostly, again, economic factors. On the next slide, it did show, if you go to the next slide, the impact of the Thomas Fire as an example. COVID being, sort of a disaster that had federal relief. I will say that going forward with the prevalence of storms and the impact of flooding, we are having to utilize our disaster reserves, and likely for an extended period of time, because the time it will take for FEMA reimbursement and Cal OES reimbursement will likely extend. And so we will have to have that cash, those disaster reserves, to respond immediately and then eventually get reimbursed.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one. Keith, I'm confused again on the 5.5% presumption for the salary and wages. You're not talking about you're continuing the 4% for what's coming up in June, fiscal year 25, but the 5% would be effective in June of 25 for fiscal year 26. Is that correct?
Councilmember Jordan, the 5.5% salary adjustment assumption would be our assumption for fiscal year 25.
Okay.
So that would be, starting in July, going through the end of June.
Okay.
And now that is an increase from the assumption that staff put forward during the 2-year plan. At that time, it was a 4% salary assumption, but as I indicated earlier, with recent bargaining actions and the planning for the implementation of the classification and compensation study, we felt that 5.5% was more appropriate.
Totally agree. I'll sneak that in. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. DiMartini. So what I'm going to do is I'll go department by department, and if your department gets called and nobody's got a question, don't feel bad. It means you did a great job with your presentation. And then once again, I'll ask my colleagues to be very concise so we can get everybody moving along here. We'll start out with the airport. Anybody got a question for the airport director? He's so ready and nobody's got a question. Thank you so much, Mr. Hastert. See how easy that was? The city administrator. Anybody? Very good. City attorney. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. This one came up under the city attorney's presentation, but it might be you or Mr. DiMartini. Ms. Ostringer, you mentioned that there was $453,000 collected in transient occupancy tax for the short-term rental enforcement program. Is that one-time funding that goes into our budget this year, or is that something that we would count on going forward as we're building our base budget?
Councilmember Freeman, if I may, the enforcement actions are considered one-time in nature, so we'll deposit that into the general fund. That's one-time money. If a short-term rental becomes legalized and eventually will continue to operate, they will be responsible for remitting TOT to the city going forward. But the goal of the enforcement program, again, is to stop the illegal activity from occurring. And so if a property is not going to legally operate as a short-term rental, then we will not get ongoing TOT from it.
And is that 453 counted in terms of transient occupancy tax for this year then? Or how is it accounted for? Is it accounted somewhere else?
Councilmember Freeman, actually in the last presentation at council today, we're going to give an update on the status of the money collected for this fiscal year. There was some money that was collected at the tail end of last fiscal year as well, and I believe the number that Ms. Ostringer quoted was the overall amount of revenue collected since the program began.
And I just want to, that goes into the TOT bucket, and so that would make it for this year or whatever, that additional fund. So if we hadn't done that program, the TOT would come in less?
Councilmember Freeman, that is correct. And again, just to clarify, 10% of it goes to the general fund, and the other 2% goes to creeks.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that actually, the TOT was coming in under, that bumped it up, but if we didn't have that program, it would be even further under.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Community development. No takers. All right, we'll go to finance, which is Mr. Freeman, or Mr. DiMartini all over again. Anything on finance? Mr. Jordan?
Yep, sorry. It's more of a, I don't know, a dynamics question for you, Keith. So, and it's kind of my spot to ask that question was community development, but I don't want to put it on community development. So if we've, the last couple of weeks, we've gone through and developed our priorities or kind of our milestones for the future. But to implement those, you have to increase resources to a department rather than put them through a decrease in resources financially. And the only choice then would be to further increase other departments over what you're asking them to do. So it's not like, so the task to the departments was just to apply a blanket number to their entire department and now come back out and tell us how you're going to make that blanket number. But if there's a case to be made for increasing or either decreasing the amount of that reduction or actually increasing financial support to a department to, let's just hit community development for streamlining and better processing of low-income housing, for example. Well, if they can't do that when they're facing reductions in a budget on a blanket basis, but you think, oh, we could take another $1 million from finance department and move it over there, when and how is that conversation held? So it's not just this cookie cutter thing of everybody reduced by 3 or 4%, but it's applying the actual priorities that we talked about department by department for specific things that we want to improve.
Councilmember Jordan, thank you very much for that question. And so I believe with the timeline and the process that council agreed to for setting your priorities just a couple of weeks ago, that there is time built into that annual process to allow for that exact conversation to occur. And so the sort of the trade-off of, funding from the finance department, for example, being reallocated to the community development department for a city council priority and objective is a conversation that needs to occur during the priority setting process, and staff needs to be given ample time to be able to understand and build those changes into the 2-year proposed financial plan. And part of our responsibility of staff will be to articulate to council the operational impacts from reducing resources from one operation and reallocating them to another department, for example. That's one method. Another method would be to identify a new or augmenting existing revenue sources, right? So that could come from fees, taxes, other mechanisms, or some combination thereof. And then another option, not preferable from a staff recommendation perspective, is the use of reserves, right? Your reserves could be considered for a one-time purpose, but not for ongoing.
Historically, that's kind of been the food fight at the end, but the action has always been to take it from reserves rather than than having a conversation maybe before that on a reprioritization between departments for something that you feel for 1 year at least might be more meeting our priorities in that one department, right? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Fire Department, any questions for the chief? Nice move, Chief, but you're not needed. Great. Human Resources, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Ms. Levy, just one follow-up because it came up in multiple departments as a strategy. In terms of recruitment and retention, one of the main challenges is the cost of housing. So how are we working within our organization to try to address that in terms of employee recruitment and retention, that cost of housing?
That's a great question, Councilmember Friedman. Mayor and council members, it is top of mind wherever you go, negotiations, talking to your neighbor in the next cubicle. The cost of housing is very steep, and it is a hurdle that people who come to work in the city of Santa Barbara do have to jump over. We are trying to be innovative, thinking of ways to accommodate the housing situation. We need to get creative. We have a number of our think tanks that are looking at what can we do as a city. We are partners with the Coastal Housing Partnership that reduces rents in some cases, helps with mortgages. But really, it's going to take some type of financial contribution. If it's a housing allowance, if the city invests in housing, we need to be serious about the hurdles that we need to overcome, and we hear about it all the time. So we're trying to be creative, but there are limitations on that as well.
All right, very good, thank you. Anybody for information technology? Library? Mr. Friedman?
The only one with questions, but don't get on me, Mr. Mayor. Better ask them now than later. And I'm going through them quick. Ms. Kennedy, I just had a question about the collections. And this came up at the library board the other day. In the digital collections and also the transition out of the black gold, because that was something that we thought it would help us with our collections overall, but from the report that was given, we're not there. Can you just speak to the issue of black gold, if it's helped us in terms of digital or even physical books, and then the ongoing challenge we have with the digital collections, and also just a clarification. You said in fiscal year 20 we had a $600,000 budget. Fiscal year 25 it's looking about 300. And start there. Is that including inflation, or is that 300,000 the same purchasing power as if we had 300,000 back in fiscal year 20?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Friedman. I'll try and take one question at a time. So in terms of black gold, leaving the black gold cooperative, we did see a six-figure savings from that. So overall, we would be in a worse situation today if we had not. But then in terms of the digital collection and curation, within black gold, San Luis Obispo County Libraries in Santa Barbara contributed approximately 80% of the funding towards that overall overdrive and Libby collection. And those titles were left with black gold. When we exited black gold, we did attempt to negotiate to take the titles that we had purchased or to put them on a platform that all citizens could access here in the county. None of those things came to fruition. And so we were left with leaving our one copy, one user titles. So in the digital world of libraries, that's when you could purchase a book title, own those digital rights, have one copy, and have it forever. those no longer really exist in 2024. You're repurchasing titles on a continual basis, every 12 months, every 26 months. And so today, Santa Barbara isn't able to fill gaps in our collections due to the unavailability of some of the titles. And so that has been the issue with leaving black gold, but potentially in the future there could be better collaboration to bring those titles back into a more shareable format. Now, in terms of prioritization of digital content, similar to when we were in black gold, the county libraries who are still in black gold with Paso and Santa Paula, that is what black gold consists of today. They have not prioritized digital collections similar to when we were in black gold. That was a pinch point then as well. Prioritizing collection dollars, digital or physical. In order to maintain library open hours, many branches, if smaller, will decide to do that and not prioritize collection dollars. Santa Barbara Public Library, it seems, has continued to prioritize the community needs, which are digital and physical collections. And the other surrounding jurisdictions have not done so. We're putting 6 figures in, they're putting 4 or 5 figures into digital collections. And so for Hoopla, for example, we allow for 10 checkouts per month. It's hard to find this information on the websites of Goleta, Carpinteria, but it's looking like 5, maybe 2 a month is what they allow, and then their budgets are much lower. So where we are capping at $15,000 per month. So really what I see is needed is a regional solution to this. We had 3 zones back in 2015. We now have 5 zones, potentially a 6th zone with Isla Vista, Montecito, et cetera. So instead of splintering all of these things, we need to come back together collaboratively. Other jurisdictions throughout the country have counties that handle and manage digital collections and really support that regional work because it's something you can access from anywhere in the county, so it really makes sense that we work better together.
And just to clarify, so although somebody in another jurisdiction might be able to, actually saying in this example, to Hoopla, they can still get a library card for the city of Santa Barbara and then use our digital content. And then if we reach our maximum, the system goes down for the rest of the month. And can you just speak to what happened in January, just real briefly, and that's all I have.
Sure. So with the way our Hoopla budget, so Hoopla is the platform where you can check out. It's no waiting. We pay per use. So when you check it out as a patron, that's when the library gets the bill. We have a $15,000 budget across the month, and that money is divided out per day. And historically, we hadn't been meeting those per day or per month $15,000. And so we actually had quite a bit of a buffer going into January of '24 as well. So all of that buffer money, as well as our $15,000 budget, was hit about the last week of January. And so then every day, the last week of January, people would get a notification that they couldn't check out any longer or things like that. And so in terms of library cards, the state of California in the education code requires that all public libraries issue library cards to any citizen of the state of California. Really is not determined by a tax base or anything like that. And so what we have done in Santa Barbara is with our e-cards, we have a process where you are vetted through an online system to ensure that you actually are living where you say you are. And in order to access an e-card from your home, you do need to live in our service area. Any resident can get an all-access card by visiting any of our branches, and we have started expiring outside our service area cards annually, and we require those people to come in if they do not live in our service area in order to renew and engage with the library. We've lost 2 branches over the last few years, Carpinteria, Goleta. Our card numbers are more than they've ever been. Our checkouts are more than they've ever been. So the story isn't playing out. We're not reducing our overall. We're increasing and losing economies of scale.
Well, thank you very much. And then we'll move to Parks and Rec. Any questions? The Police Department. Moving to Public Works. Operations, Water Resources, or Downtown. All right. The Sustainability and Resilience Department. And last but not least, the Waterfront. All right, thank you all for being there for that. We'll go to public comment now. I have a few speakers in house. We'll start out with Margaret Crocker. We'll have 3 minutes at the dais for, I got a feeling you are going to be talking about the library.
This is true, but I planned for 2 minutes, so I won't take an extra minute.
I love
But
that.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse and City Council members. My name is Margaret Crocco. I'm Chair of the Library Advisory Board. A recent article in the New Yorker included this statement, quote, "We know who we are through the stories we share," unquote. The short story I wish to share with you today focuses on the challenges the library budget faces going forward, while also acknowledging our enormous gratitude for last year's council decision in finding funds to allow the Central Library to be open 7 days a week and East Side 6 days a week. Today's appeal for your help focuses on the looming cuts to the library's collections budget, which includes, as you've heard, both physical and digital materials. Over the last 10 years, many libraries nationwide have spent as much or more on digital materials than physical ones. And the prices of digital materials continue to rise. For example, to get concrete, to add another 2-year lease, not a purchase, but a lease, for an additional e-book of a bestseller can cost the library $90. Audiobooks can cost the library $100 per copy. Moreover, many families rely on the library's digital materials, which include books, newspapers, magazines, TV shows, and movies. Several local schools also draw on these digital resources in their critical efforts to improve literacy among the city's school children. As Councilman Friedman reported to you at last week's City Council member and is revisited today, a large number of library card holders live outside city limits, increasing demand, as Director Cadiente has just pointed out, and certainly requiring long-term deliberative discussion with outside stakeholders. But for now, I ask the council to consider what story it wants to emerge from its budget hearings this year. Will it be a story about the library's inability to buy hardly any new collections materials next year due to cuts in its budget, which will severely constrain access for the poorest members of our community? Or will it be a story of the council's finding, once again, a way to support a library budget reflecting the diverse needs of our citizens and equitable solutions for all? Thank you.
Thank you. Cecilia Harris.
Mayor Rouse and City Council members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Cecilia Harris. I'm the Vice Chair of the Library Advisory Board, and I join many others in thanking you for the support you've provided that allows the library to open 7 days a week at the central location and 6 days a week at our East Side Library, providing not just extended hours and access, but continuing many valuable programs that reach out to all aspects of our community. I personally witnessed the value of extended library hours when, during the major storms, I, with my little granddaughter, went to the Central Library and joined basically a brimful of happy families feeling secure in a safe place and being able to give their children a little break that day. As you go through the difficult decision-making process of allocating resources for our community now and into the next budget cycles, I bring your attention to two critical areas which have come up today, but I'd like to reinforce them. First one is the resources to support our professional library staff, especially in the areas of mental health, outreach, and security. This is in the best interest of our community and certainly is in concert with collaboration with other departments. Our librarians act as a key interface in our community, and they daily face challenges serving the public beyond providing basic library services. These situations are stressful and demanding. Please do all that you can to provide them with adequate trained personnel for reliable on-site security and for help with mental health outreach to de-escalate redirect, and intervene safely when potentially dangerous situations arise and situations where our human neighbors need help and support. The second area has come up quite a bit. I'll add just a couple comments to it, and that is I would ask you to consider adequate funding for collections. The demands and costs have gone up. As Councilmember Friedman pointed out, some of these numbers reflect that we're about at 50% where we were before in the budget, not even counting inflation for this. And, you know, the understanding that nearby communities in our county utilize our central library digital services to an extent that it often becomes, as you've heard, difficult to meet the demands and needs of our own Santa Barbara citizens. So resourcing strategies must be developed to address the lack of adequate funds going forward with all the other financial budgeting challenges we have to enhance our collections and to reduce wait times. And as a member of the Library Advisory Board, our commitment is that we will work together with you to find cost-effective ways as you keep this in mind in making budgeting decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Cronin-Hersper will be followed up by Lauren Trujillo.
Good morning. The beauty of going at this point is pretty much what I was going to say has been said, but I really appreciate the conversation between Director Carente and Mr. Friedman, because I think a lot of people don't understand a lot of how the library works. I've been president of the Friends of the Library for, I think, 7 years now, and it was shocking to me to find out that anybody can get a library card basically anywhere they want, which is supports education and literacy. But then now we're in a situation where the city of Santa Barbara is paying more than their share. So as I would like to see in the future that we work with the county and acknowledge that everybody can use our digital resources and share that burden financially. I think we can sit down and hopefully come to some resolution. Thank you. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you. Lauren Trujillo.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. And my name is Lauren Trujillo. I am the Foundation Director of the Library Foundation. Here we are, this budget kickoff season. Thank you again for prioritizing the library budget last year and reopening library. I have spoken with many library users of all ages who've breathed a sigh of relief knowing that the library is open. The community needs this support now more than ever as we continue to seek normalcy after the pandemic and take on the mental health issues and educational gaps facing our community. The library is one of the only indoor public spaces accessible to everyone and acts as a resiliency center. Thus, our librarians are first responders every day, providing care, shelter, and a supportive environment. As you consider the library's budget and this budget season, we call on you to keep in mind the expanding responsibilities shouldered by our librarians. I encourage you to look further into 3 critical items, some of which have already been listed, but the library is about the people, and the library staff need support as they are managing people in crisis every day. How is the city respecting the work that they do and ensuring they have resources available for the trauma that they endure? Something as simple as parking should be considered for them. 2, contracted security is not enough and not as effective. Staff time and resources could be better spent if security was run internally. Additional security will be needed once Plaza is completed. Current conditions are dependent on the contractor's availability and often not the same people, limiting their consistency in responding to patrons. While we are all excited about the future of the Navigation Center, we must acknowledge that this will supplement services, not supplant. Third, the collections budget, which we've all mentioned. I'd just like to add that private support cannot sustain the collection needs, the status quo or the demand. I know it must seem that us library supporters are asking for too much again, and you will tell me that we are in a deficit, but I ask you to reframe your positioning of the library this budget season. The library makes up a small percentage of the general fund budget. I urge you all to consider what are the values of our city, what is the value of the proactive work the library is doing for the city every day? How does the library fit into your priorities that you've set this year? I thank you for your commitment to Santa Barbara and want to leave you each with a copy of Eric Kleinberg's Palaces for the People to help you consider the items and questions we've raised today. Thank you for doing your due diligence.
Thank you. And Ms. Gorman, are there any speakers online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. So we'll go back to council, and as far as setting or giving recommendations or feedback, this does not have to be done in a formal motion or fleshed out. That could just be basic ideas and things you'd like to see or ask staff to look further into. And we will start with Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. And I do have comments for each department, so I'll go as quickly as I can. First, for the budget process, I'm really appreciating the updates to the online budget tool, the transparency, particularly the consistency across departments and how those budget numbers are going to come out. I think it is a transparent process. Everybody is very aware of every dollar spent, and this really highlights that and builds public trust in that. And I'm appreciating also the change in the language to the base budget. I think that's a very, very helpful improvement. And really the clarity on the budget development phases, appreciating that and the timeline, and when you really highlighted when public would be giving input, when council is giving input, and the iterative nature of that process. Very much appreciated. I also have to take this opportunity to commend the Finance Department for your really excellent and accurate financial projections that I myself have questioned in different ways, and I think also public has had some questions on, and you've been spot on, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that, appreciating that. I really appreciated slide 46 and the discussion of the reserve policy and which particular disasters or influences affected that policy. And also the clarity on the assumptions that are built into the multi-year forecast, really naming those and putting them out also builds public trust in the way that, you know, people might have different ideas about different assumptions, but all the assumptions are laid out there. I think the revenue and expenditure lines, the shape of them make more sense to me at least now, and they're not as complicated, and they clearly show the story of that divergence in revenues and expenditures. So just really appreciating the consistency of efforts across departments and laying that out that way. For the airport, really, thank you, Mr. Hastert, for the efficiencies and taking the noise concerns seriously and building that relationship with our community partners. You know, didn't fall on deaf ears, and it's been very proactive on your part. And then also thank you for really, I don't know, elevating our airport. It's really world class, and proud of it, and particularly through disasters and flooding and keeping it open and operating. City Administrator's Office, just wow, so much good happening there through transitions, highlighting Daytime Navigation Center, and really the council priority process, already seeing through that how us naming our priorities and what the process is, already seeing that reflected in the slides throughout today's presentation is really gratifying to be able to see reflected back to us how our council priorities, even though we haven't gone all the way through that process, like already seeing the shift in that, really appreciating. And the City Attorney's Office, along those same lines, I love that the updates were tied to council priorities of livability in Santa Barbara, and the short-term vacation rental pilot, tenant protections, local housing trust fund, really naming those and in terms of council priorities, appreciated, and appreciated naming that council priorities are your priorities, and that's a communication between us, and that council priorities are really community priorities, so it's really symbiotic that way. Community development, it can't be understated that housing element update and certification was a really big deal, really big work effort. The Local Housing Trust Fund, Daytime Navigation Center, all really great achievements. Really want to emphasize, though, in that future work, adaptive reuse. We've been talking about this for a very long time. It is really time for that ordinance to come forward. Hotel rezoning, so we're not keep talking about, you know, how many hotels we have, is it too many, and that we don't have any options for that. Continuing to streamline the permitting process and emphasizing on that, not relaxing our standards, but relaxing the red tape around those standards. It's really important that we not lose what makes Santa Barbara, but not having it be so difficult to get there. And then the State Street master planning efforts have been really large within that department. For IT, just major kudos for SB Connect. I can't tell you how many times I've heard such positive feedback on this, and that goes to Public Works too. I've just heard over and over again how well it works, and I'm noticing we're not getting so many emails about this, and it's just so much more effective that people are going directly to SB Connect, and it's really working, and so growing on that. I love the GIS strategic plan. There's so much data there. I just learned, last week and the week before about new layers on that GIS system. And with so much data, having a way to integrate that into policy making and data-driven decisions, I'm really appreciating that. And GIS is such a powerful tool, and growing that program is a good idea. For library, I love the resilience hubs, love the integration of the community connection. That quote of reducing barriers and increasing connections is really what the library is all about. That really wanted to highlight that. Loving the Spanish outreach, appreciating the trauma-informed approach and the extra training and de-escalation. An education trauma-informed approach is all we talk about. It is such a fundamental way to be interacting with the people you serve. So I'm appreciating that. I really love everything you're doing. This issue, I loved the mission statement, and seeing that across the bottom on those slides where that was really helpful. We clearly need to prioritize this regional collections issue. I'll just throw this out there. I know people who use the LA library, who live locally, who use the LA library for their digital collections. So it really doesn't seem like just a conversation between city and county, but also maybe our state legislators really looking at this issue. And I'm wondering, for our digital collection, and these are questions to look into, if maybe we restrict it to income levels or schools, use in the schools, or clearly want to make that collection robust, but don't want to be paying more than our fair share for it. And a lot of people I know who are using the digital library aren't necessarily the most in need of it. I don't know how exactly to say that, but, and so if we're looking at maybe other partnerships, more regionally than just our county, I don't know. I still very much prefer a paper book, so thank you for this copy. Let's continue to keep the library open, and really, I appreciated that also. It's not replacing those community services, but the Navigation Center will be augmenting those services too. Parks and Rec, just wow, doing so much in those council priorities of quality of life and services. You really articulated so well, Ms. Zachary, the challenges, but then also highlighting all that's being done. I just loved the priorities for fiscal year 25 and how they were laid out. Just nothing but praise there. For the police, appreciate the officer wellness work. Really appreciating the expansion of co-response. That just continues to be successful. I'm really happy to hear the successes in the hiring practices and the emphasis on locally hired and recruitment. And that really commending the public information officer work for the police department, and I see those posts all the time. They're actually really cheerful and proactively upbeat about so many positive things that the police department is doing within the community. Public Works, a lot of really fabulous work. This downtown parking structural deficit situation, glad to see that's on the priority looking forward. It's a really big deal. We all know that. So continuing to look at how that is going to be fixed, I guess. In operations, the winter storm responses were phenomenal. Paving efforts. For the stormwater plan, I would like to think that we're going to be looking at an integrated, holistic stormwater plan rather than maybe individual properties each dealing with their stormwater, something to be looking at, not direction, but something to look at. I realize we still first need to get a handle on what the issues are and how our stormwater works. In water resources, there's so much that goes into safely delivering our water, and the rate water studies and that coming back is important. I want to re-emphasize that for these perpetual vacancies, we can't have our rates be a limiting factor of paying our workers what they need to be competitive for delivering these critical services. The 6 vacancies, it hits us hard, and whatever we need to be doing, maybe be looking at how to be more competitive in that. Keep working on that pavement condition index. In sustainability and resilience, just what a success, this fledgling department, and how it's grown, but grown intentionally toward services to the community and in building financial resources to be able to give back to communities. So the climate action plan, Santa Barbara Clean Energy, the electric vehicle incentives, that's great to hear that it has more participation than in the past. I'm just so excited that this department is able to focus and vision and integrate within all the other departments within the city. So I'm happy to see how that is integrated within. For the harbor, obviously storm and swell event response has been fantastic. And really just thank you for taking the cruise ship program improvements seriously and really doing a broad reach on that and input, and looking forward to hearing those suggestions. Overall, it seems really clear that insurance reform needs to happen nationally, statewide. I mean, this is, you hear it in individual departments and in our overall budget. So, I mean, maybe that's a legislative issue. Maybe it's something we talk about this afternoon. But really clear that that is a big deal. Love the SB Connect across different departments. It's great to see that a lot of different departments are stepping up community engagement in a lot of different ways, and that was highlighted. And the last thing, well, maybe not the last, I'm almost done, but we're really seeing the impacts of a changing climate across all these departments. It's, preparing for droughts, preparing for floods, but then also the financial volatility, health, safety, livability, affecting insurance rates. So keeping that sort of front and center, the impacts of a changing climate and how that's affecting our budgets. It's also clear that the cost of housing is at top of mind across all these areas. Just emphasizing what we already know, that is a really, really big issue. So continuing to see that through our budget priorities. And again, thank you for the council priorities workshop. That was really helpful. And I think it's really clear that these are addressing council priorities. And it's also really clear that we need more revenue for essential services. I mean, that came out loud and clear through this, that, these are our ability to carry out with our essential basic functions as a city are in jeopardy. And that's clear through these presentations. But really, thank you for this great overview.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to start with some department comments, and I didn't have as many yellow stickies, so I can't keep up with that. So these are just ones that resonate with me, and in particular, there are ones either I might have known, or in some cases I didn't know, but I should know, and they're an opportunity to talk about things that are really good that have happened or are about to happen. So these are just several, maybe 8 or 9 that resonate with me, and they're going alphabetically. So airport, kind of knew this, but plus passenger count, but less airplanes. You know, great accomplishment. I know some people out there might want to drill down and say, well, the bigger planes make more noise, but the bigger planes are also on a track to the newer ones to be quieter than the littler planes were too. So eventually we'll get to a point where we'll have more passengers, less flights, and less noise than you had historically. And I think that's just a message that's a good message. City Attorney, I'm really, you know, if there's one department I've just had great success, and I think has really answered the call this year, and that was, I think, every one of your guys' points: short-term vacation rental enforcement, tenant protection ordinance, and housing trust fund. And all 3 of those, of course, are connected umbilically, but particularly the tenant protection ordinance. While I've been sitting up here as a planning commissioner or council member, I just know how hard it is to do an ordinance and then ever even suggest in the next year to come back and redo an ordinance again. And I think the tenant protection ordinance has been done 3 times in a year or a year and a half, which just reflects a commitment on our part to do the work to make sure that we're making sure it's effective and not just something to say we did and walk away. Finance Department, they're increasing foray into 24/7 services, so I can get my dog license or my business license online, and I know you're continuing to work on that from credit cards and other services and centralization, and I think that's one of our key pathways to doing our services effectively, but costing us less in the future. And it also, certainly for my kids, but for me too, it just provides an easy way to accomplish it without having a stamp, having an envelope, getting in line down below. Fire department, there's nothing wildland fire before or after my name, but seems to me if it rains a lot for 2 years, it also grows a lot in between that. And so the addition of our vegetation management services contracts with third parties, and even more important, our ability to have our own crew to assign when we see a problem here locally and need to get on that. And then, of course, looking forward to the efficiencies of the unified or regional fire command coming up next year. I would echo SB Connect for the IT department. Great addition. One suggestion, I know I showed you my example of Sacramento's airport where they actually have postings all over the wall, and it's not over the walls in different facilities, and it's not an app. It's just you QR code and you're immediately put into the app, and it's location based. And but oddly enough, there's a propaganda thing sticky on our little refrigerator in council office about SB Connect and to use it and what to do it. And it seems like a pretty small crowd that would be using that little refrigerator in there. And I think one of the improvements you could make about that is to develop some, I think somebody's already developed it, but to have some small posters that QR code you to the apps itself, either iOS or Android, and you put those around in high traffic facilities. So like, you know, out in the hallway of City Hall or down on the first floor or somewhere, to continue to push that number above whatever that was, 1,600 comments on that. Library, I know it's always about the library this time of year, but I am so impressed every time I'm anywhere that's not a library and I see the library, whether it's on the street, whether it's at the zoo for an event, I mean, at a city park. I think from my perspective, that out and about services stuff, the library on the go, is one of the most valuable flag wavers for your services, even with all your other challenges, because I don't have to remember there's a library. I don't have to go look for the library. You're somewhere in front of me, and then that will key that there is a library somewhere in 2 or 3 parts of town for me to go investigate. So I'm really happy to see that. Police department, really happy to see growth in the co-response program, and any gain in the mental health holds program is a gain to be chased. So happy to see that too moving forward. And then of course, improvements in your vacancy rate. Public Works, with the last 2 years of rains, thank God for Measure C. Thank God for our employee paving program that makes our roads and streets look so much better, or else we'd resemble a small town just up there somewhere with all its potholes. But just think if we hadn't had Measure C the past 5 years, and then it had the last 2 seasons of rain like we had, and what our roadways would have looked like. So that should be a constant reflection on a successful voter initiative for a city. And then waterfront department, outside of your comfort zone, I think I could safely say, I just want to congratulate you for the cruise ship engagement process. And my goal for that is to support you through the end of that process and not punish you. So I just want to make sure you know that this should not result in some type of punishment, that you put yourself through this slog. But I thought you've bent over backwards to really make sure you're available to be engaged to multiple groups and run through that process, and I think it was really good. Then I just have 3 comments on the budget process itself, and that would be, I think probably all 3 of these I talked about last year, and that would be for departments when they come in with the results of their reductions, when they go through the input process and get to a point where they've made the reductions, that they come in also with a clear narrative of what that looks like in terms of lost programs or services. So you don't have to dig through 100 pages of a police department budget or something to find out that we're actually going to hold 4 officers vacant, or we're going to hold 2 parking enforcement positions vacant. That is a clear part of their budget presentation, that we met the requirements, but here clearly right up front, after we're showing you we met the requirements, is what's being affected by those requirements. And then I'd love to see a clear narrative on financial resources that are not being provided because you're not being given them yet, on areas that the department heads took away that were clear priorities from the meeting we held jointly a couple of weeks ago. So I'll just pick on community development again, and if that's streamlined and less time processing, and how do we get low income or lower income rental housing through the process quicker, and you're unable to do that with a blanket cut on your department of 3 or 4% or whatever, but you could do it if you got additional money there. I would appreciate seeing that as a clear talking point from a department. Library does this really good every year, just to pick on one, and they load up the benches with people who help them do it. There's nobody loading up the benches for that example of community development, but it was clearly a priority, I think, that resonated with all of the council at our meetings. And then lastly, I talked about this last year, and I think that this is more with you, Keith, and that was clear information on both department, but on particularly enterprise fund reserve dollars, so that you're not looking at a line where target reserves is here, but the reserve amount being held there is up there. And I know that that's just a result of somebody historically has not segmented those reserves into, well, this is a pot where we have our required reserves, but we're also putting into that same pot a runway expansion or a waterfront capital project, that we can clearly see that somebody's not stockpiling reserves just because they can, but they are actually programmed reserves in addition to their required reserves. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to say I appreciate my two colleagues warming us up for the Oscars this Sunday with these speeches. So, and it's a good problem to have, because, or it's not a problem, it's great to have, because I think, to their point, we're doing so much in the city. All those highlights are amazing. Each department is doing great. So I won't cover it, because then you run into the issue of, if you say 99 and you forget 100th, then it's the 100th that you always remember that you didn't say. So, but I would have a suggestion, especially during budget season now with our new PIO. It may be helpful, because I think it's important for the public to hear all these, and it gets kind of lost in a large hearing like this, is throughout the budget season is to highlight a department and the achievements they've had along with some of the challenges, and then proactively reach out to some of our media and do op-eds that would go on like Ed Hat, that could go on Newshawk, and the department heads could be interviewed to highlight what we're doing, so they get that exposure, and then also the challenges ahead, and we can do it during the budget season. And I think it will help the public understand some of the tough decisions that we have to make on there. But great work to everybody, and like I said, I'm not going to go out and highlight. I think my two colleagues did that very well and highlighted many of those. Just to this format, it's a new format that we've done. I appreciate all the work that went into it, and I like this format rather than each ones that we were doing. It really forces the departments to go into the challenges and focuses them, which helps focus us, and that's the important part of it. So I like this going forward, and I know it'll be slightly different in the 2-year process, but this is very helpful in terms of this year's budget. And then just a couple things I'm interested in getting more information on, both in this process and then in the 2-year budget next year, is being that we do have fiscal challenges, looking at, instead of saying each department has to come up with X percentage of reductions to meet the targets, is there a better way in terms of being more strategic in departments? And now that we have the council priorities, as was mentioned by my colleagues, that we might be able to finesse that more, so that you're looking at each department, and some might be a little bit higher, some might be lower, but what are the trade-offs? Because I think we kind of lose when every department has to come in with certain reductions. And then, so any way we can look at the either or and the trade-offs are on that. In libraries, the digital collection I think we heard about, and I specifically support efforts that are underway and need to be beefed up to look at the regional solutions and collaborations with the county and engaging the county in particular on the per capita and others to try to address this. It's going to take multiple years to address the issue of the digital collections. It's not something that can be done in even a year or two. It might even take 3 or 4 years over time. And there's a lot of options that were discussed at the library board, but having those higher level discussions with the county administrator's office, which would be able to then go out and look at, pull together the other partners. I think it's important to start those discussions now and look at to the future. And the issue of security, it is ongoing. I think it was mentioned today that when the plaza opens, there will be issues. So the current system of security that we contract out isn't particularly effective, as I understand it. So maybe park ranger or other types of things could be looked at. Cruise ships, I'm glad they're coming in April, because I am very interested in how that's going to affect the budget, because there are implications depending on what is decided there in terms of number of ships, et cetera. One thing I'd like to understand is how far out are we booking? Is it something that's going to change, next fiscal year, or are we booking out through 2026? Because there's a whole system there that affects parking rates that we can charge with cruise ships, but there's environmental concerns and others to address. So that information will be helpful to help us understand the budget coming up for this year. Community development, I think in terms of adaptive reuse, hotel, short-term vacation rentals, all those have been discussed. I think that this year is a prime year to try to get those going, as well as how Paseo Nuevo and the Cumbre Plaza are going to affect your workload this year, because those are two major projects that will need to be prioritized. And so I would want to understand coming back how we're going to balance all those. And then police and fire department staffing challenges. I want to understand more what your staffing challenges are now, any vacancies you have, but also looking at 3 to 5 years of session planning as we need to budget for those, because those have, a higher percentage of the cost of the general fund for obvious reasons, but we need to make sure that we are properly staffing you and planning ahead 3 to 5 years, and what that means in the overall terms of our expenditures going in and revenues and what we need to do. And with that, I just really want to thank all the departments and all the staff and all my friends at the library over there for coming out, and appreciate it. So thank you, and look forward to the upcoming budget season.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm really trying to avoid going into labor during this hearing, so I am not going to lean into the appreciation, but please know, as my colleagues have so well articulated, my respect and gratitude for all that you do for our city, which was clearly on display today and then at our workshop. It's immense. We are so, so lucky to have you, and it's remarkable how much you all do, frankly, with nowhere near enough. So thank you. I did just want to make 2 very brief points. My first is, I think it was echoed by everyone, but wanted to highlight in particular how effective I think this new process is with regard to priority setting and integrating it into the budget. I agree that it was very clear in the presentation, and just very excited about the direction that that's going. So thank you very much, and I think that that's really going to allow us to be holistic in our approach to budgeting moving forward. So really thrilled about that. Secondly, and finally, as it is budget season, I have to take the opportunity, as I always do, to reiterate how important I think it is, though I very much respect staff's position as it pertains to our reserve policy. It is clear to me that there is not enough money to do what it is that we believe is necessary in this city. I continue to feel very strongly that there is a middle ground that we can find between draining our reserves or setting a policy that is not low enough to protect our city, and maybe reducing it a little bit to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility. I appreciate that a number of times it was reflected in this presentation that we need to increase revenues. Well, when I hear that, what I hear as a mom and a working person is like, a lot of that's going to come out of my pocket, and costs are already going up and up and up. It's incumbent on us, I think, if we think about not only serving our residents through these different programs that the city puts forth, but also how do we balance their financial needs and financial health, that we do what we can to find a balanced position. To me, I think one of the ways of doing that without putting those costs really directly back on the people that we're serving is to find a more balanced approach to our reserve policy that would give us a little bit more flexibility. So I realize that is not up for discussion, and we've already voted on that, but till I'm done here, I'm going to be bringing it up every year. So you'll have to hear the speech at least, or I guess just 2 more times. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, and thank you. Ms. Gutierrez, did you have anything, or you could?
I think my colleagues covered everything, but I just want to say thank you. I know that in the last 4 years and a half, we've had a lot of changes and there's a lot of new directors, but to see this start of the new budget season, how organized, and it does reflect our retreat, but to hear every department thinking about the future and wanting to bring the city up to a position where not only are we serving our community and taking care of our city, but also taking care of city staff. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
All right, very good. And my only recommendation is you guys should all go get some lunch. Talk to you later. Thank you very much for today.